Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of the Paso Robles City Council for Saturday, February 26th. Mayor Steve Martin speaking, and I'd like to read the following before we get started. The city has returned to hybrid public meetings pursuant to AB 361, which allows for a deviation from the teleconference rules required by the Ralph M. Brown Act. Residents now have the option to attend the meeting in person or to participate remotely. For those attending in person, the council chamber will be at limited capacity to allow for compliance with the social distancing recommendations of the state and county health departments. Masks will be required for unvaccinated individuals in the council chamber. If maximum capacity is met in the council chamber, additional attendees will be asked to participate in the meeting via the remote options listed herein. To participate remotely, residents can live stream the meeting at www.prcity.com/YouTube and call 805-865-7276 to provide public comment via telephone. The phone line will open just prior to the start of the meeting and remain throughout the meeting to ensure the opportunity to comment on each item heard by the council. Written public comments can be submitted via email to cityclerk@prcity.com prior to 12 noon on the day before the council meeting to be posted as an addendum to the agenda. If submitting written comments in advance of the meeting, please note the agenda item by number or name. City council meetings will be live streamed during the meeting, also available to play later on YouTube by accessing the following link, www.prcity.com/YouTube. With that, I will call the meeting to order and invite all who are able to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman Hammond.
Join with me, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I hear a slight echo. Are people hearing that online, or is that just us in here? Just us in here. Okay, we will push right on through that then. Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Garcia? Here. Councilmember Gregory?
Here.
Councilmember Hammond?
Here.
Councilmember Strong?
Here.
Mayor Martin?
And I am present. All council members present. A note on public comment at this meeting. Public comment for special meetings is limited to agenda items only, and an opportunity will be provided for each agenda item when that item is called. Please see the previous notes that I mentioned before about how you can access and participate in this meeting remotely. So we begin our meeting today with item number 1, which is a discussion item on City Council goals, review and update workshop. I just want to toss a note out there before we get started and hand it off to staff. We have a 2-part meeting today. And the first workshop portion of the meeting, we're going to be talking about goals and strategies, sort of the big 30,000-foot look at what we've been doing to date, and to see if after public comment and council comment, if there be any changes in those strategies. Part 2 is going to be sort of the when part of the budgeting process. In other words, we have goals, we have strategies, but we need to prioritize them. We need to say in what order will those things be undertaken. What we will not be discussing today will be specific expenditures. Once we're finished with the process today, the city staff will take the input and then go and bring back an itemized budget with the expenditures attached so we can review those at a future public meeting. With that, I'll turn it over to the city manager to begin today's meeting.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Council, members of the community. We're excited today to get together on a rare Saturday afternoon to be able to discuss where we've been over the last couple of years, where we hope to go, and engage the council and the community to get everybody's feedback. I think council's aware that in the past this has been a multi-stage proposition preparing the budget, and you did a good job of summarizing that, Mr. Mayor, when it came to this is the kickoff of that, where we really kind of put things on the table. Normally, we probably would have started this maybe a month earlier, but with the transition, not only with my position, but getting Chris, our new assistant city manager, and our department heads together, we got this going as quickly as we could. So we start off with our first slide. And as you pointed out, this is the session format. We have 2 agenda items today. We're going to be talking about goals and then the budget. There'll be 3 of us presenting today. I'm starting off, then we'll hear from Mr. Hewott, and then we'll hear from Mr. Cornell as well on respective areas of our discussion today. Throughout this process, we're going to, very similar to any other city council meeting, we're going to have opportunities for public input. We'll have opportunities for council questions, and we'll also have opportunities for council comments and direction. We're scheduling 15-minute breaks in. I know Mr. Gregory approached me before the beginning of the meeting and asked for a 2 p.m. break. He has an important matter he has to attend to at that time, but we'll reschedule after that. We're hoping to wrap this up by 3:45 with about 15 minutes to take care of whatever additional business that might arise and wrap the whole session up by 4 p.m. So our first part of this, as we talked about, is we're going to review our progress on existing city council goals to date. You bet. So we're going to review our progress, where we've been. As we know, the 2 years have been anything but normal. We kind of hit a pause when we hit COVID, and it caused us to pivot quite rapidly on a lot of our existing council goals and initiatives that you directed staff to put into place. But that doesn't mean that we didn't make any progress. Of course we did. I think that the overall theme that you're going to see from this is very positive. Not only is the budget and the health of the city in good condition, but we've made a lot of progress on existing city council goals to date. The second item is very important too, because I think one of the themes that you're going to hear today is that staff has been listening not only to the community, but also the council when it comes to your directions, your initiatives, and your goals for us. So because of that, we were able to, through those listening sessions, able to take some of the existing goals and modify them to hopefully meet your expectations and to accelerate this planning process a little bit. But of course, council has the final word on any of our adopted modifications or clarifications to the existing goals. But you'll notice that there are certain sections where we've input some of the feedback that we've already received from either you or the community. As we mentioned, there'll be plenty of time for public comment and input through each step of this phase. And then at the end, we're going to have City Council discuss and direct us on any of the modifications, which we'll return to the City Council with after this meeting, as you indicated, Mr. Mayor, with a more built-out list of initiatives and things. This is a 2-year budget cycle, so we can only accomplish so much within 2 years. So I keep reiterating that because we're going to have to actually be able to adopt and initiate things that we can actually get accomplished in this time frame. Doesn't mean that they won't carry over into ensuing years' budgets, but that's the plan. Next slide. So the format again, you're going to see major budget themes. You're going to see our opportunities and our challenges that we've identified. You're going to get a preliminary fiscal outlook. Again, we're going to have public comment and input, and then we'll have plenty of time for council discussion of budget priorities. Next slide. So to put this in context, one of the reasons I think that the community and council may remember is we've done budget planning and goal setting in various fashions over the last several years. So today we put together some of the input, community input, council input, staff input that we've really started going back to 2017. Some of you might remember the National Community Survey that we did that helped council focus goals and priorities back in 2017 and carrying forward into 2018 and 19. We did community priorities and an issues survey in both of those years, 18 and 19. Mr. Cornell and the previous city management created a 10-year forecast during the 2020 budget planning session. And then in 2021, we conducted another facilitated goal setting session, which you'll see some of the slides that'll probably remind you of that process and what council discussed with the community at that time. And then, of course, here we are in 2022. We're bringing all of those years back before you to remind you Our preliminary analysis of that at the staff level was the goals between 2017 and 2021, have largely remained similar. There's been some initiatives that have changed, some priorities that have changed, but overall themes between those goals have remained pretty consistent for the community and for the council. So I think it's a great opportunity, as we said, to reset the level on coming out of COVID, the pandemic, to be able to reset that level and resume and create the momentum that we had prior to going into the pandemic. Next slide. So again, as a reminder to the community and to the council, here's our budget calendar for this year. So of course, we're here February 26th with this particular budget workshop. We're going to be moving into April with the regular city council meeting on the 19th. We'll bring back the 23 and 24 proposed budget. Of course, that's going to incorporate all of the information and discussion that we have today. And as needed, we'll be going and talking with advisory board committees, as well as any other community groups that might be interested in the results of the February and April actions that the council is taking. As we move into May, on the 9th, we'll have another budget workshop that goes into a little more depth. You'll hear from department heads, get department overviews, recommendations, and discussions on capital improvement plans, our enterprise funds, as well, of course, as our Measure J20 expenditures, which focus on 3 areas, which is public safety, police and fire, as well as our roadways. And we'll wrap this up hopefully in June with the regular city council meeting on the 21st for council to adopt a final budget to guide our next 2 years. Next slide. All right, so we're moving into our adopted goals and priorities. Grab my notes here, apologize. So in this particular slide, what you're seeing here is a reminder of what we'd gone through and what you ended up with in our most recent workshops and adopted goals in 20 and 21. Number 1 is community health and economic recovery. Number 2 is infrastructure. Number 3 is public safety. Number 4, housing and homelessness. Number 5 was quality of life amenities. And number 6, governance and community partnerships. The legend that you're going to be seeing next to a lot of these things as we review them, and there are a lot, so it's important to look at this, is you'll notice a check mark next to any of the key goals and priorities that we've accomplished. If they're still ongoing or partially completed, you'll see the little arrow pointing at them. In the planning stage, you got those 4 boxes, and then of course at the bottom a black box that shows that they're not the project wasn't completed for whatever reason. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our Assistant City Manager, Mr. Hewitt, to discuss or to be able to recap with Council some of the goals and accomplishments over the last couple of years, and that'll provide a good jumping off place for us. Mr. Hewitt?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, City Council members, Chris Hewitt, Assistant City Manager. So we'll jump right in and talk a little bit about the accomplishments that we have seen over the last few months and years related to existing goals. You'll remember this great visual from the culmination of last year's goal-setting session. A little bit hard to read on the screen, but it gets into those priorities for each goal area that then set off the work plan for staff. And so what you're going to be seeing today is some of those accomplishments that tie back to these strategy areas. So let's jump right in. Let's... All right. So first, on the community health and economic recovery side, obviously this was a specific focus of the council and the community over the last several years as it relates in part to the global health pandemic. The city and the staff and the council have taken great strides to support the local business community and the community at large through monthly stakeholder calls and meetings, advocating and dispersing relief funding to address those COVID-19 impacts. Looking at ways to engage partners in unique opportunities to, again, keep businesses open and moving forward during this time, including dining in the park. We also had an opportunity to promote Paso Robles for the remote economy, and we've done that through opening and continued support for the sandbox, through broadband grants, the free Wi-Fi program here at the library, looking at unique workspaces and workforce development tools. We've also pursued ways to diversify the area's economy. Mr. Sloan is on board and is working daily towards this task and has been meeting and continues to cultivate relationships with businesses and individuals to this end. Working with partners at REACH in our Rural Innovation Initiative through the HBA. And of course, we'll get into a little bit more about this, advancing the discussion around both the spaceport concept and the tech corridor. I will not read word for word here, but what we did want to provide the council and the community are some direct feedback that staff received, especially around the small business relief grants and the Keep It Local programs that this council approved and that the staff implemented over the last year. A lot of great feedback. We pulled these quotes out just to show really the impact that these programs made, and in many cases being able to keep those businesses moving forward as we faced unprecedented times. So infrastructure, another key area. We continue to invest supplemental sales tax and other general revenues towards improving road quality citywide. Our capital improvement team and our public works team is working daily to engage and get additional road work underway and complete. They've done a great job there. Also been able to secure funding for traffic and transportation improvements, in particular the Creston Road Grant, and through the SHIP program, I was able to obtain a grant to install pedestrian improvements in 2 different areas. Also looking to secure funding, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in just a moment, for the design at the Huerjero Creek Bridge and the Vine Street bridges. And we continue to pursue funding opportunities to expand internet access and connectivity throughout the city. The city was awarded a $2.8 million broadband grant. We think that's an excellent start for some of the work that we are looking to do as we round the corner into the next budget cycle. And again, we'll talk about a little bit more there in just a moment. Still looking to partner both with Cuesta College and the school district regarding traffic concerns. This is an ongoing item that we'll be looking to dig into as we move forward. And again, looking at additional funding for improvements within the Niblick corridor. We do have that application in process now. I believe we had a meeting, if I'm not mistaken, this last week to discuss further that opportunity with the CTC, and also working with SLOCOG on a grant for pedestrian improvements around the Flamson School site. Of course, J20 is front and center too with our work plan. Again, this year we've been able to effectively utilize those funds. And we're working day in and day out to make sure we're communicating the results of the investment the community has made in those 3 areas that Mr. Lewis mentioned earlier. On the public safety side, a lot going on here. You see a lot of blue areas, means progress is ongoing in several major projects and programs. Again, looking at the design and building of phase 1 of the Union Road Public Safety Facility. That work is underway. Completing the design for the police substation and fire station 3 facilities. Those are both in design now. We're still working on upgrading the 911 system. That is ongoing. And improving public safety response times. One of the key assets in being able to do that is equipment. And we are pleased to tell you that we took delivery of a Type 3 engine not too long ago. And that is helping the chief and his team be as responsive as we can in response times for the public. Also have done quite a bit of work around public safety staffing, hiring police officers, getting them through the academy and into field training, as well as The same with firefighters. So you can see we've made some great strides there. Still some work to do, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. And then again, we're still working on, as we ramp up staffing, being able to increase the visibility of officers, of course in downtown, but as well in other parts of the community. Warren's been really busy, and it's reflective, I think, in the small font on this slide as we tried to squeeze everything that Warren and his team are doing into here, and I don't want to run out of breath, so I will not try to read every one of these things verbatim, but what I do want to show and what we did want to reflect was that there has been a lot of work being done despite all of the challenges that were in front of developers and banks and everything else in the last year or two. A lot of work being done on increasing the housing stock, both market rate and affordable housing within the city. And you can see that there are several different developments at different stages of planning and implementation. We're working towards meeting certain goals and objectives through the RENA process. We're looking to, again, maintain those vibrant neighborhoods through the development of ordinances, upgrades to playgrounds and green spaces, and again, through planning processes, especially through the Olson, South Chandler, and Beechwood, and the Uptown and Town Center plans. And then, again, building upon partnerships with ECHO. Of course, they're an important partner as we move forward in developing programs and services around serving those that are unsheltered in our community. And again, we'll talk about a little bit about that in just a moment. Quality of life amenities, again, a lot of work being done on the quality of life side of the house. Again, we've been able to restore and expand recreational opportunities across the community. We are working diligently towards completing important improvements such as the pickleball complex. May need a technology change here just real quick. All right, there we go. Through construction of a pickleball complex, park upgrades, Paso Plan Wheels program, and of course at your last meeting, this council endorsed the library and recreation 5-year strategic plans, which we'll be talking a little bit more about in just a moment. Of course, supporting a thriving downtown, talking through parking permits and that program that remains ongoing to a certain degree, but again, the program is in place. Approving and moving forward the Railroad Street Plan, and continuing to engage in a downtown stakeholders group and making sure that staff and the council is receiving feedback and having those open conversations and dialogue with our downtown stakeholders group. A new thing that's been, sorry, we're dealing with a little static here. A new thing that we are working on that is new on the radar, again, that we'll talk about in just a moment in a little bit more detail, is a recently opened funding opportunity through the state. It's called the Urban Greening Grant Program. And this is an opportunity to leverage state funds to make certain improvements in terms of trees and stormwater runoff and green bike lanes and pedestrian improvements. And the focus right now for that, we'll dig in just a moment, is the Black Oak Riverside 24th Street area. So that is one area where we think there's a lot of applicability for that program and a way potentially to leverage state funding there. Continuing to work on programs and opportunities to celebrate, again, the local heritage and increase diversity and inclusion within the community. And we've adopted the bike and pedestrian pathways plan. That's not sitting on the shelf. Staff is having quite a bit of discussion about projects that may be brought to the council for consideration that makes sense in terms of what's out there today, what's the logical next step to expand the bike and pedestrian network and seeing about leveraging, again, outside funding to help do that. Again, just want to pause here to provide, again, some other input and feedback that we received on quality of life amenities within the community. Highlighted some feedback from Mayor Martin as well here. Again, I know that the recreation team, I got to meet with them about a week and a half ago. They're just a great asset to the community, and it's reflected in, I think, the feedback that we get about the programs that are provided to the public through the work that they're doing, as you see here. So our last goals and accomplishments slide, it talks about governance and community partnerships. So we've been working to strengthen the trust in local government through opportunities, outreach, transparency. There's plenty, that's always ongoing. That's why we have it as ongoing. There's always work we're doing in that area. Our office is in discussion right now about how we can further enhance what we're doing, again, to improve outreach, to enhance our communication efforts. We're again looking at ways to develop the next generation of community leaders through partnering with our K through 12 partners and proactively engaging, again, all segments of the community working towards that and as well. That is just an ongoing everyday thing that we're working on. I want to highlight some awards. Ryan and his team received the GFOA Award for financial reporting. And that is, I know, a time-consuming process to get that application in, and it's not one of those awards that is just given out, it's earned, and so congratulations to him and his team for that. Again, we've held several public workshops, hybrid meetings, retooled our technology in ways for the public to participate over the last year or two in the democratic process. And we're continuing to up the content in our newsletters and opportunities, again, for engaging our community on social media and looking to do more of that in the upcoming budget cycle. Of course, the only way we can do that is if we live within our means over the long term. So we have, as Mr. Lewis mentioned, updated the 10-year fiscal forecast. Mr. Cornell will get into a little bit of the numbers today and talk a little bit more about where we're headed, or where we think we're headed in the next 2 years. But that's something that we're keenly focused on, is making sure that the council has timely information as it relates to numbers as circumstances may change, to make sure that we are living within our means and being able to provide the best services that we can to the public. And of course, the public budget process, it started last meeting. This is one part of that process, and we'll continue to engage the public throughout the budget process and beyond. The budget is, I'm going to maybe steal a little bit from Mr. Gregory in a discussion that we were at yesterday. It's a living, breathing thing. And it's not just the 4 to 5 to 6 months that we're putting the numbers together and adopting the budget. It is an ongoing, evolving process. So we want to make sure the public is engaged throughout that process every day, because it is the blueprint in which this city is able to provide those services to the public. Again, these were accomplishments that we could not fit in any one of those categories, but really wanted to highlight for the council and for the public a lot of the great work that our team is doing. Again, I will let those in the room and online read through these. This presentation will be up on the website no later than Monday morning, so it will be there. So again, a lot of work done by the departments to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, to leverage outside grant funding, which is so vitally important, because then it frees up local dollars for other priorities, engaging the community through community policing activities and through our recreation and youth programs. We've been implementing some new tax collection and sewer rates, again, and then, of course, looking at recruitments and other core services as well. So we want to transition here quickly into what we're calling suggested changes to the current goals. But what I really want, and Mr. Lewis touched upon it, from staff's perspective, this is not staff's strong recommendation on what needs to be included in the goals. What we were doing is we were looking at the goal areas from a continuity perspective. It made a lot of sense for staff where we could is to continue to leverage those goal areas because, as Mr. Lewis mentioned, a lot of that feedback from those community surveys, from those facilitated sessions over the last several years carried these themes through. And so there was, with the exception of one, we wanted to try to see if there was an opportunity to keep some of those goals areas stable as we move forward. Where you'll see some suggested changes is likely under those priority strategies, which were really more of that detailed, those detailed points that really drive the work plan of staff. And what you're going to see is a lot of that work plan and a lot of those proposed changes are really the outcome of discussions that this council has had in one form or another over the last 6 to 8 months. So I would not expect too many surprises there, other than there may be some things, hopefully, that the council has input on where there's more, there's tweaks to what we have up there to better articulate where this council would want to head in the next 2 years. So let me jump right in and kind of give you a flavor of what we're talking about. Community health and economic recovery. This is the one area where we thought we could broaden potentially the proposed goal area a little bit to better describe, I think, what this council has invested in and where this council has discussed wanting to look at, which is really a broader economic development and vitality goal area. As you look at the proposed strategies, anything in black is what is adopted today. The ones with strikeouts in them are ones that staff is suggesting be considered for removal, and then anything in green for additions. And so I will not spend a lot of time on the ones that are there. I just wanted to highlight those that staff is proposing to remove and add. The two that staff is proposing to remove at this point are more specific to the COVID-19 pandemic impacts. And I don't want to minimize the fact that that is over. It's not. But as we start to broaden some of the work that we're doing, we want to, one, look at diversifying or broadening the proposed goal area to encompass a broader economic development lens. And in doing so, still having those COVID-19 and business support aspects as part of the work plan, but really focus now more broadly on things like completing the phases of the spaceport feasibility study and moving that forward, adopting an updated economic development strategic plan, which hasn't been comprehensively updated since 2006, and then establish a cannabis governance framework as well. On the infrastructure side, not a ton of changes here. These tend to be longer term, big picture, big projects. So you're going to see a lot of those same things here with one addition of adopting a regional broadband strategic plan. This broadband is becoming the fourth utility. It is something that this council has invested already in through the grant that it received. And I know that it is a focus both of the tech corridor, but more broadly as well, ensuring high-speed connectivity to businesses and residents throughout the community. Why we have the word regional in here is there are several funding opportunities that are coming through the state and the federal government in 18 to, let's call it, 24 months that will require, most likely from what we're hearing, communities to be thinking regionally. So in doing so, we have been having discussions with in tandem, with Mayor Martin, the city of Atascadero, about developing a regional broadband strategic plan. And while that can include some very specific items that are a priority for both Paso Robles and Atascadero, the discussion is how can we show regional cooperation and we thought that that was a good opportunity to do so. We did want to add it in the work plan here. Public safety, again, a lot of these things remain ongoing. The one thing that you'll see here is a suggested goal to adopt an updated strategy for recruitment and retention of sworn staff. We know that this is a priority of the council and of the community to make sure we have a fully staffed police and fire department. We do understand the challenges that exist right now in hiring sworn staff. And that is evident through, I believe, is it 9 right now? 9 vacancies that do exist on the police side. So we know that there are challenges. We've been doing quite a bit of work to make sure we get in front of those prospective recruits for those positions and those potential laterals. But there's more work that we think needs to be done. And again, because of the prioritization that this item has had, both from the council and the public standpoint, we felt comfortable suggesting that to the council today as well. Housing and homeless. Again, one of those areas that staff has been very engaged in over the last several months, and it's evolving, and it's one of those areas that we want to make sure that we put enough staff capacity, time, and resources towards. So last year, it was building on that partnership with ECHO and the shelter and those homeless services. You can call it a reword, but we reworded it a little bit with partner with ECHO and stakeholders, meaning a larger group of stakeholders, to identify opportunities to enhance service delivery and reduce the number of unsheltered individuals within the city. And I'm sure that there will be some discussion on that, but felt like that was a more broad, all-encompassing goal that placed a bit more work on the city side to be a partner in that solution there. Quality of life, again, a lot going on here. I'm, again, happy to see that the master plan on the library side is done. So we cross that out and we say, okay, now we got to activate those plans. And so we did include that here. We also talk about, again, based upon some of that feedback that staff's been receiving, augmenting maintenance efforts at all city parks and green spaces. And again, looking towards establishing policies and regulations for parklets and outdoor dining. Finally, on the governance and community partnerships side of the house, we're really wanting to make sure that our communication efforts and our communication strategy to inform the public and highlight the city's successes and the work that's being done by the 230 some odd staff members is comprehensive. So we're looking at ways to improve strategies, and potentially start to build assets, digital assets, footage, photos, that sort of thing, to really build out our communication strategy to engage the public on where they're getting their information today in a way that is proven. So again, that's one area where we'd like to consider an update to the goals. And then we struck out reestablish. We want to just continue to make sure that we're liaisoning with the school district. And so that was just a minor tweak there. So I think for the time being, I am going to stop droning on, and I'd like to turn it back over to the mayor as we move to the next part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as I mentioned before, it's going to be a two-part discussion today. We're talking now about goals and policies that have existed in the past, some suggestions from staff for changes in the future. And this is obviously set up not just for the council to provide input, but also for the community. I don't see a lot of community in the room today. I don't know if we have anybody online electronically to comment, but we definitely want to wait to hear their comments before we start offering any of our suggestions. So at this point, I'll ask council members if they have any questions of clarification regarding the presentations that have been made so far. Mr. Gregory.
Yeah, on the urban green grant, can you discuss that a little bit more, or just tell us what that's about?
Gregory. Is it on? All right, there we go. Councilmember Gregory, the Urban Greening Grant is a state program. It's a state grant program. I'm the legislation is escaping me, but it was the funding was approved through state legislation several years ago. There's a call for projects that was just released. It's about $50 million that's available to cities, counties, and other entities. The urban greening component, what they're specifically looking for is ways to reduce greenhouse gas. There's a heat reduction element to the grant program where we've seen in other communities that grant program be successful is increasing bicycle, pedestrian, greenhouse gas emission reduction, lighting through solar street lights. There's a lot of ways that the state is looking to make those types of improvements through this program. So what staff is exploring right now, again, is an opportunity, again, based upon feedback from council, is looking at the Black Oak Riverside 24th Street corridor for some beautification opportunities, pedestrian and bicycle enhancement opportunities, street lighting opportunities. We think this grant really speaks to a lot of those things that have been asked about in that area. So timing was there was a real opportunity for timing here. This popped up and we thought, let's try to run after this. So applications the proposals are due March 28th. So Ditas and her team and Dave Athey in our office are collaborating on that. There's going to be outreach. We're on a short timeline to do it, but we think we can turn it around and get that application in.
Thank you.
Councilman Strong.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 areas of questions. It goes back to the slides, chronologically back to the infrastructure slide way at the beginning under goals. And it says secure funding for and design Warrow Creek and Vine Street bridges. And it's got that not completed there, rather than in planning stage. I thought that we already had most of the work done for it to be shovel ready, because we've secured in the legislation the money federally for these bridges, but they have to be shovel ready in order for us to even make the application.
Sure, Mr. Strong, I'll jump in there on that. So, yeah, we do have significant infrastructure needs, and funding is a big source of that. So I can go through them kind of one by one to give council an update on where we are and what we see in the landscape with respect to funding. So as we know, the Gateway annexation process has gone through. The city had developed a developer agreement with the project development, and one of those is the realignment of Vine Street, which requires a bridge there. So, and Ditas can probably jump in, or one of the others, or maybe Warren, but I think we're about 98% on the plans for that bridge. So really, we're identifying the funding, how we're going to pay for that. One of the challenges that we've had with that particular bridge is that it's more considered a local bridge, not a regional type of transportation, despite staff's best efforts and previous management. I think council's been involved trying to get a little bit more regional approach to this. So far, we've kind of struck out, so we're probably going to look at having to fund that locally unless some other opportunity presents itself. Now, with respect to the other 2 bridges, we have the Warrow Bridge and we have the Highway 46 overcrossing, which are planned. Both of those are what we're trying to classify as regional bridges. We know that proposed development in that area are going to bring a lot of jobs. Some of them are up to 3,000, which a lot of those may or may not live within the city, but they're going to bring jobs to the community and to the area. And in order to get those developments over the finish line, Caltrans has required certain traffic mitigations or proposed those in order to get to phase 2 and phase 3 of some of these projects. We're going to need that Highway 46 overcrossing. So as Mr. Strong mentioned, there's a lot of money out there. The state is flush with cash right now. There's a lot of stimulus money out there. Of course, we have the infrastructure bill that was passed at the federal level. So there's a lot of money out there that we're trying to target. The challenge right now is that they haven't specifically said how they're going to dole out the money, who's going to get it, when they're going to get it, and what types of projects qualify. We have partnerships with SlowCog right now, which they're going to set aside several $1 million in matching funds for us to be able to help design the Highway 46 overcrossing, which is great. We're hoping to bring Caltrans to the table. I think I've mentioned to the council in various community conversations that Caltrans has invested almost $1 billion in improving Highway 46 and turning it into an expressway. Unfortunately, their planning and their investment stops at the city limits, right at Airport Road. And to date, we haven't identified, any plans to, as we're calling it internally, put the golden spike in the Highway 46 project and complete it. We're really trying to work with our legislators, of course, engaging council, community members, and everybody we can to let them know that that's about a $50 million bridge that improves Highway 46, which is a state asset, and it is truly a regional benefit. So as we said, we have the county engaged, we have the city engaged, now we have to find a way to get the state engaged, and those kind of projects that are regional in nature are the ones that usually garner the most amount of funding. So we're working diligently with our lobbyists, with our elected representatives at the state level, and of course, Mr. Strong's been very active and engaged at the federal level to try and bring us those local dollars. But the bottom line with all of these is they have to be shovel-ready plans, meaning that all the plans, specs, estimates, all of those things have to be completed, the design work, in order to get that funding. So staff has been working very hard to advance that objective along. Of course, we're going to need additional funding in ensuing years to get that done. But as of right now, we have yet to be successful in getting someone, despite our best efforts to date, which of course there's a lot more work to be done, but we need probably about $75 million worth of funding in order to date, which of course there's a little bit of feedback there. So we need, in today's dollars, we need about $75 million to get these two particular bridges, which we're calling them phase 1 and phase 2 of this traffic circulation plan out there, because they really are complementary projects. One can't be done without the other in the long term. If we want to see a spaceport come to fruition, if we want to see a tech quarter come to fruition, if we want to see projects like the landing or other developments, the Paso Commons and others really see their full potential. And of course, we've talked about partnering that with opportunities for broadband and fiber and other infrastructure investments throughout the community.
And I'll have comments later under comment section. I won't address that any further. My second question goes to the public safety item under goals and accomplishments. And the hired 6 police officers, 3 police officers, recruits, and 6 firefighters. And yet in conversations, we have none available to consider going to cannabis retail.
Well, at this point, Mr. Strong, I'm happy to address that as best I can. Of course, our current ordinance right now only allows for delivery services. We don't have any retail, we don't have any manufacturing, we don't have any transportation or lab testing. But as you noted in the earlier part of this presentation, that's one of the amendments that we're proposing. Council has brought it up repeatedly, the community has brought it up repeatedly. We're very aware that it's also a controversial topic within the community, but in the end, we know that we're going to have to advance that to some degree, whatever the council chooses to bring forward. And as part of that, as other communities have experienced, it seems prudent that the police department, their staffing be improved to be able to address whatever additional aspects of cannabis that the council and the community chooses to establish. So at this point, it's kind of for the police department, and we have Chief Nord here that can augment this, but it's been one step forward, two steps back with recruiting. We hire police officers, and some of them leave to go to other communities. We've had police officers leave the business entirely due to the climate and the difficult nature of the job right now. So that's one of the other strategies as well that we recommended adding, was coming up with some sort of robust package to recruit and retain not only our police officers, but our firefighters as a key element to keeping the community safe. But you're very astute in the fact that, yes, they work hand in hand, public safety and whatever the council and the community chooses to embrace with regard to cannabis.
Thank you. Finally, going to our community health and economic recovery suggested changes to our current goals. And at that point, I'm looking at two of them. Complete all phases of spaceport feasibility study. And that's really the airport area. And it doesn't mention the military aspect of our airport, which has been used in the past by the military, is still being used to some extent by the military, and looks like under the international situation at the moment that it may be used more extensively by the military. So I hope that we pay some attention to that aspect of our airport as well. And so that's my question is, I guess if it's a question, is why hasn't that been considered? And maybe because we had such a calm international situation until just a few days ago that it wasn't, it hadn't risen in the priorities. Finally, establishment of cannabis governance framework, and I think I just mentioned that, and implementation of retail, if that's what we decide to do. And I would like to see, I think we've all requested that it come back on our agenda. So I hope that's soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Councilwoman Garcia?
Yes. Yes, thank you, sir. I just have a question on the infrastructure slide where it said traffic concerns and partnership with Cuesta and school district. Has there been, do we have an idea of what that looks like, or we're in the steps of creating something?
I'm sorry, do you want me to save these, Mr. Martin, until the end? I know Mr. Strong had a question on the military aspect. I can do them all at once.
As long as it's a question right now, please, let's take care of that right now.
You bet. So on the infrastructure with Cuesta and the school districts, of course, Cuesta is on the impacted area of town that we talked about with regard to the need for bridges. And as we know that area, when it comes to commercial and industrial space, is expanding, and trying to come up with a comprehensive strategy that improves traffic in that area is part of our circulation element. Whenever Warren and his team, Mr. Frace and his team, evaluate project or propose projects, we're always looking at how it impacts traffic in there, especially some of these big projects like the landing. And so that's part of our overall comprehensive strategy. Beyond that, when we talk to our local school district traffic concerns, we're always looking for funding opportunities and partnership opportunities to look at alternate modes of travel, whether it's bicycle paths or improving traffic safety, working with the police department. We have citizen volunteers. We have our traffic division at the police department that are constantly involved with addressing those particular needs. And of course, one key element, we have 2 school resource officers, which are assigned full-time to the school district to help liaison and improve not only traffic safety, but overall safety for our students.
Okay, that was my concern because I saw it there and I know that the school is no longer doing busing. So that just means that more parents are dropping off. I know that they're trying to do the time, making it at different times, but that still is a very heavy time So I was just wondering we're working on a strategic plan for that.
Yeah, all of our planning really encompasses that, as Mr. Frace can attest to, that, the development agreements are in place for some of the major proposed housing developments. Extensive study was done, and in fact, those development agreements require traffic mitigation plans, whether it's syncing up the lights at significant cost along the Niblick corridor, Creston corridors, and improvement projects, or improving right-of-way near key intersections within town. So some of those projects have been analyzed and looked at with specific plans that are required and funding identified, and there's others that are yet to be identified and improved upon based upon future expansion.
Okay. My other question was on the increase on visibility for officers on foot or bicycles downtown. So since I know that we have night vacancies and it's hard for us to maintain police officers now, till we get there, is there any way that maybe we could just do more lighting downtown so that at least there be that safety going on?
I think that's exactly what this workshop is designed for, is to receive that feedback and then take those ideas and the will of the council and get it implemented.
So we're going to get deeper into proposed solutions to problems later. Right now, we're at the goals level. Did you have a response to Mr. Strong's question?
Yeah, I wanted to elaborate a little bit on his military aspect of our spaceport. I think, Mr. Mayor, you might be a little better positioned to speak to this than I am. But recently, we've been meeting with Hunter Liggett. We've been meeting with Camp Roberts. We've been meeting with our neighbors to the north. Recently, the mayors have gotten together and proposed a memorandum of understanding that kind of regionalizes that relationship between the military installations and our communities that are within that sphere of influence to do exactly what you said. We've talked about the potential for funding because of the military relationship that we have and our community has for a long time. So nothing's off the table when it comes to leveraging whatever friendships, relationships, and other opportunities when it comes to looking for regionalism and funding opportunities to improve circulation and quality of life.
Thank you. More questions, Mr. Gregory.
Yeah, Ty, just for a question on top of what Fred asked about, as far as shovel ready, are we closer on Huerhuero than the other bridges?
So right now, staff is exploring two options right now. Obviously, the landing is, we're knee deep and trying to forge a relationship with the developer on that through agreements. One of the aspects of that is trying to find an immediate solution to moving traffic on that side of the town once that huge warehouse is potentially built. So yes, you approved plans for us to be able to get, Ditas might be able to speak to the number, $1.5 million. Is that what we're looking at? Right? Yes. Yeah, just for the design, which is the first step in getting that done. And that came out of local dollars. We realized that time is of the essence. The only way we're going to get funding out of that is to spend some of our own money to move this project along. We're responsible for the investment there. So we're moving as quickly as we can to have those plans ready.
Thank you. No more questions for me. Thank you.
And Mr. Hammond.
Thank you. One thing, it's always nice to talk about goals and everything. The issue, though, is it costs money. And so I think to start, on the playing field, I'd like to kind of hear maybe from Ryan, is the city flush? How are we sitting right now with finances? I mean, there's a lot that we're talking about here, $75 million for infrastructure. We didn't even talk about parking structure. So there's all kinds of things that Christmas is coming, but do we have the money coming, or do we have a plan? What really is our financial situation with, the COVID money that we were supposed to be getting and extra funds that we didn't realize, and, our sales tax is going up that we didn't think was going to happen. So there's a lot of cool things that are happening, but maybe we can kind of just paint a little quick picture. Maybe would that work?
No. We're going to get into a lot more depth than that in the second part of our conversation today.
Yeah.
And Mr. Cornell can augment my comments here. But I think that overall, as I alluded to in the beginning opening preamble here, is that we're doing well financially. But we have a lot of needs, and there's a lot of hands that, could use dollars, whether it's increasing staffing within the community or within the organization to address immediate service needs. I think that there's themes that we've heard, over the several months, whether it's parks and recreation needs or whether it's, within all the development that's coming out in Mr. Frace's area. There's a lot of needs throughout the organization and within the community. And we have ARPA money that's set aside for infrastructure. We're well above where, recommended or policy levels on our unrestricted funds. But when you talk about it in the context of, $100 million or more in just infrastructure, and we didn't even talk about roads. Right. We have the road tax that's going to expire in a couple of years. Been putting $5 million plus per year, $5 to $7 million a year into our roads. And we know, I think everybody in the audience and at the dais here realizes that we could even put more money into that. So there's a lot of needs that I don't know that we're going to be able to meet in 2 years. But that's the exact purpose of this workshop today, is to say, hey, we've got 2+ years. How are we going to do it? With that, I can let Mr. Cornell kind of give a brief overview of his opinion of the budget.
Sure. I think that's very well said. We're going to dive into a little bit more of the finance side of things. And I think what we're looking for in this part of the presentation is kind of direction, priorities. And then when we leave this discussion this afternoon, that's kind of where staff kind of fits in. Like, here are all the priorities. How do we fit this in within our needs? We do have discretion. Like Mr. Lewis said, we are in good financial position. Our reserves for the end of this fiscal year are projected to be back up to about 50% of revenues. So we definitely have some good money to make good decisions with, but we, like he said, we can't do it all. So it is really kind of important that we prioritize and at least get some sort of direction so that we can frame the budget for the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Any other council questions? Thank you very much. Let's open it up to the public. Anybody would like to comment? This is your opportunity. If you're here in the room, please make your way to the podium. And if you are waiting online, please dial up the number so that we can talk to you telephonically. Good afternoon.
945 Spring Street. I've been following all the processes from way back and commenting on most of what you've planned in the past. And I'll be commenting on the changes that are going forward. But as I said before, the most wasted saying is, I told you so. I told you so about the rerouting of the strategic plan of 46 on a loop road, and that proved to be a mistake to give up that. And now you're wanting to reroute Airport Road into an overpass instead of putting a signal at Airport Road. And I'll end up saying, I told you so when you get done with that. Because the only logical thing that makes sense is to put a signal at Airport Road. You got so much in the way of activity going on at the airport, and to bring it down and run it up over the 46 and then bring it back up around Union Road and through the new intersection at Union Road and Golden Hill and taking it back up to 46 and then running it onto 46 is just not common sense. I'm sorry. I'm not an engineer, but I can see where common sense makes better sense than some engineer's drawing. And I also want to comment that you have in the past recognized that our economy in this city is heavily reliant on two organizations that have spearheaded especially the downtown, and that's the Chamber of Commerce and the Main Street program. Don't ever forget that. They are the spearheaded. I was on the Chamber of Commerce when we started the first wine festival, and that brought the tourism here. I'm on the Main Street Board of Directors now, and we're trying to revitalize the downtown after it was so devastatingly shut down. Please work with us on the Chamber and the Main Street, and we will help you if you work with us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, council members, and city staff. My name is Mark Dart, 955 Walnut Drive, Paso Robles, and I am the president of the Paso Robles Youth Sports Council. I have a couple items I'd like to talk about, and I really thank you for allowing me to have input into our city's goals. First off, our city council accepted our recreation and library services 5-year strategic plan at a recent council meeting. This plan is the culmination of a lot of hard work and much public input from stakeholders in the city. One of the items of information in the plan that I think is very important for us to remember, and I think that might be an eye-opener for all of us, is the amount of youth that resides in our city as compared to other areas. Our city is home to the highest concentration of youth in the county. And therefore, I believe it's our responsibility to be the leaders in providing youth recreational opportunities in our city and provide the facilities to accommodate them. Accepting the strategic plan is just the first step. I'm glad to see that was a goal on the slides here. Now we urge the council to take action on those items in the plan that they endorsed. I used to have a boss that I worked for who had a saying, "He who implements wins." And that was speaking to the importance of taking action. It doesn't have to be a perfect plan or a perfect action. It's just by taking some action, it's going to get us closer to our goal. This plan actually has many really good action items in there. So I urge the council to implement them. The sooner, the better. As you know, a lot of them pertaining to city staffing needs, and one of them in particular is utilizing the volunteer members that we have available to us in the community, and being able to coordinate that work, I think, is very powerful. Secondly, a matter of facilities. The Youth Sports Council has partnered with the city on many sports fields projects. And from what I'm hearing, the sale of the property at Pioneer Park might be closer than ever to coming to fruition. If that's the case, we really need to put together a plan and the financial resources to build a replacement baseball field at Larry Moore Park. We all know how long it takes to put something like this together. So I believe that if we're that close to making a deal on that sale, we really need to start this work. Although the conceptual drawings of the built-out park contain 2 lighted baseball fields, I am of the understanding that the initial plans are to only build 1 lighted baseball field at Larry Moore, along with other improvements. The Youth Sports Council would like to request to partner with the city by providing funds and manpower so that the second lighted field can be built at the same time. This concept allows for the park to be a lighted multi-sport facility. Baseball outfield fences will only be up during baseball season, and during the rest of the year, they can be used by soccer, football, and other sports organizations. The lighted aspect of these fields is an important one, as all of the sports have part of their seasons that run into the wintertime and the shorter days. And lighted fields in the city are really one of the facilities we just are really lacking, we just don't have enough of. So if the city could provide us with a commitment towards this plan, it would also help the Youth Sports Council with their budgeting, fundraising, and planning processes. Lastly, you know, another thing I was glad to see on those slides as a goal was the augmentation of maintenance at our recreation facilities. And I'm really happy to say that, you know, there's been some recent activity on some of our fields, maintenance-wise, being done, and I'm really happy to see this level of maintenance kind of happening. So we just need to continue that and find a way to keep that going on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Welcome, Mayor, City Council, employees, and Ty. How you guys doing?
Good.
I wanted to, I'm not going to say I told you so. So I want to thank the city council for approving the Norma's Arch, whatever that was, 2 years ago. And it's a great project. Thank you for your vote of confidence, and finally got it done. And it's exciting. But it brings up a broader topic to me. The gentleman before me was talking about kids and the high population of kids that we have in this area. And I've always kind of not liked sports for the wrong, I was an athlete, but don't get me wrong, not liked American sports for the reason that for every $100 spent on sports, there's like maybe 30 cents for art for kids. And it's really shocking to me that as a culture that we want to make sure that our kids play baseball and all this other stuff, but you got literally 20% of children are creatives. They're creative kids. They're the ones the most prone to a criminal life or drug abuse or a number of all the problems that life can dish out. Creative people have a hard go of it. And the city, I don't know what the role of the city is. You know, for myself, I just am grateful for Warren. He's been championing my causes and ideas, and he's been a great friend. And we're excited. We kind of have a vision. Warren and I drink coffee, and we talk about life and art and the future of Paso. And it can't all be. It's really. I mean, I look at the need. We got to have a great city, operating city. I like to turn my water on and have it come out. I like, the sewer to be taken care of, the trash to go, all the things that a community needs, I like. But the problem is that we tend to get so focused on the gears of running a city or a group of people is what we are. We're a tribe here. And so we're doing that. But at the same time, we're so caught up in the minutia of the, to me, it's just the things we got to do, mundane stuff, that art seems lofty, and so I want to go back, and I'm not trying to I just want to bring these ideas to your attention. I'm not condescending. I hope I'm not. I'm really just trying to champion an idea. And it goes back to when Barbara Partridge, she was, I'm using the word champion every other sentence, so I'll do it again. So Barbara Partridge championed the whole public projects, 5% went into an art fund. And then that got redacted for reasons unknown to me. I know that it was around the time that 2008 and that whole crash came and revenues went in the tank and there wasn't, so they went and stole the money from the art fund or discontinued or whatever. And so that's maybe a little harsh to say steal, but absconded with it. So I'd like to just put out the idea of reenacting her vision and on public projects that a percentage would go toward art into a fund that I have nothing to do with. I don't care about it. I'm getting old now. Not as old as Steve, but I'm getting up there. And I'm getting tired. I don't know, I just bought a place in Wisconsin and I'm going to be up there in the summers fishing and stuff. But I still have a heart for Paso. I still want to continue to do more arches and do more public art projects here. I'll be coming to the city council for, with these projects for approval. And got some exciting ideas to balance the wine with, all the different things and try to bring another element of attraction to Paso Robles. We saw what happened with Field of Lights. It's mind-numbing to me. the amount of people that have come from all over the world to see Field of Lights. And so we know that Sculptura, where I'm an artist in residence out there, huge attraction for people. They like the art. So I'm trying to bring to the top, a lot of people just don't care about it. It doesn't offend me because everybody's different, but some people, art doesn't factor into their thinking at all. But the problem is that it's integral. It's an integral part of child development to recognize the need for the creative children. And instead of like, I don't mind build a baseball diamond, I could care less, but just have a balance of some sort. And so that's my spiel. Is there anything else? My name is Dale Evers.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you for your comments.
Does anybody have any questions for me?
At this point, we want to hear from you. So
okay.
We're good.
Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you very much.
All right, see you.
Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to speak? Welcome.
Hi, Mayor and council members and staff. My name is Floyd Butterfield. I have grown up in Paso. My family's been here for 55 years. And quite a few years ago, I was on the board of the food bank as it grew from the local Paso facility to the regional thing it is now. And later, I joined Paso Cares, partly to get involved with trying to help the homeless here in Paso. And I happened to join at a time when Paso Cares services were just, the need for the services were really growing. And at the time, I knew almost nothing about homelessness in Paso, but I certainly had seen it growing. I realized then that Paso Cares was kind of at a stage like the food bank was. It was small, all volunteer group, kind of being overwhelmed by demand. And I was one of those on the board of Paso Cares that encouraged working with ECHO, because ECHO has years of experience and had a paid staff and other reasons. And ultimately, I joined the board of ECHO, and I'm now currently serving on that board. I just want to comment and encourage the council to continue and even increase your support of ECHO. From my point of view, they're experts on dealing with homelessness, and most of us are not. And one of my roles at Paso Cares and ECHO is to raise money. I had some success doing that with the food bank from private donors, but private donors want to see the public involved. They don't want to just donate money when the public isn't putting up money and the public's represented by the council. So I am going to continue to raise money for ECHO, but it's very, very important to see a substantial support for ECHO from the city council, in my opinion, and I encourage that.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to speak? I see no one standing. Anybody online?
Yes, sir. First, we have Larry Warner.
Larry, welcome.
Hello, this is Larry Warner, 741 Orchard Drive. First of all, I'd like to thank you all so much for all the effort you put into doing this presentation, and I'm just very proud of the staff and leadership of our city. It's awesome. I just want to mention a couple things. Number one, I'm really excited that we're doing an economic development strategic plan since the last one in 2006. We have to have measurable goals, and I think that's the way to do it. One of the things associated with that is the website, the city website. If they could have a link that is an economic development button on that main page, or a button that says "Do Business in Paso" or something like that, link it to the chamber. There's some really good information on the chamber website. Also, as far as increasing the visibility of the officers downtown, I would request that we increase the visibility of the officers in the uptown area also, because that area definitely needs that. And I've contacted the city about the parking situation up there too, so we'll work on that. Beautification, I didn't quite understand the whole process there, but if there's one place that needs to be beautified, it would be Paso Robles Street exit. So maybe that could be tossed in there. Then I want to thank you for talking about the bike and pedestrian plan. In my comments to the city, I also mentioned the Nico's Trail because we were just out there a couple of weeks ago, and it's dangerous. And it's a liability for the city, and we have the money to do it. And Joe Collins at the Alder Creek Apartments contributed to that. So if we could move forward on that, that would be great. And last but not least, I would like to thank you all for your support of the pickleball, and hopefully we'll be able to get over these challenges we have. But I want to thank you all so much. As I said, I'm just very proud of my city. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else do we have online?
Next is Dana Stroud.
Dana, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Martin and council members. I too would like to thank you for hosting this workshop and appreciate that you provided time for those of us who work during the week to be able to attend and provide comments. I serve on the Rec Foundation Board of Directors, and as such, my comments are going to be directed with that in mind. It was a couple of weeks ago, you as a council took the action to endorse the 2 strategic plans that staff brought forward for recreation services and library services. That was a significant step forward in helping to elevate and create awareness around the value of our recreation and library services to our community. Both of those plans are intended for this type of work to provide you with a roadmap to help establish priorities and goals as you move forward. I would like to point out 3 key goals, if you will, and action items within those plans for your consideration today. First and foremost, I would like to encourage you to consider where recreation services in particular creep out beyond just a quality of life amenity, but actually covers into the couple of other areas of importance here in the city, including the community health and economic recovery, as well as public safety. Quality of life is certainly important, but when we start to think about our outdoor recreation assets being a driver for people who are looking to relocate to this community, that speaks to the economic value of recreation services to our community. And so I hope that you would consider where recreation fits in the broader sense of the community assets and cuts across some of these other categories. Very specifically, in the plan, there is a call to hire recreation staff to assist and oversee the use of our parks facilities in the evenings and weekends. I believe this falls and could fall into a public safety opportunity as well. In the plan, it calls for that type of a position to be hired in the year 23-24. With the coming out of the COVID, we saw such increase in the use of our outdoor facilities, it would seem prudent and timely to consider hiring that staff sooner rather than later, and in partnership with our public safety efforts in order to ensure that our facilities are used appropriately and to minimize potential negative impact from undesirable activity that may be occurring out there. So encourage the staff positions to be hired to oversee our outdoor facilities. Secondly, it was mentioned earlier by the Youth Sports Council. One of the ideas and recommendations in the plan had to do with the sports fields that we have in our community. And as we saw the amount of build out that we're anticipating, expecting to see families moving into this area as well. We are already at capacity with the fields that are available for our diverse population to utilize. So we would encourage your consideration to consider expanding and exploring ways to grow those parks facilities, particularly around our soccer and or youth baseball, as we start to see that youth population, the diverse youth population in our community grow. And then finally, there is a recommendation in the plan around facilitating volunteerism. And very specifically, there is the position to be hired as a recreation volunteer coordinator. We would encourage you to consider prioritizing the hiring of that staff level as well in order to begin leveraging the volunteer resources that we do have in our community to better expand the services that we are able to provide with the current limited services that we have, but yet, or better yet, be able to utilize the experience and the resources of the volunteers that are in this community that are looking for ways to engage. Having this staff coordinator on board sooner rather than later allows us to tap into all of those resources. And then finally, I do have to put on my Cuesta trustee hat for just a moment. And as you're considering your economic recovery, I would remind you that you do have the North County campus. And while I don't see it referenced under the economic recovery section, I would encourage you to think about the role that Cuesta plays in the workforce development and potential apprenticeships and opportunities for your economic growth by tapping into the Cuesta resources. Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
Next is Desiree Harris.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Council. I just want to say first, thank you guys for continuing to make this accessible and available. I'm glad that it's still available for us to be able to comment virtually and to view it virtually, and it's greatly appreciated. This is my second year being able to watch this presentation and give my comments. And so just some comments based off of what was presented today. I really, in terms of housing, I'm going to always kind of continue to stress the importance of working class housing. I know that there's always that emphasis on the low income housing, but I think you'll see that by trying to focus on working class, those who may be above that low income range still are really struggling to find housing. We've emphasized making this a destination area so much so that I can tell you at least 4 or 5 houses within view of my doorstep that are vacant Monday through Friday. But there's people who cannot find housing and end up leaving this area. So I really want to emphasize the working class housing, and that will definitely help with your guys' recruitment too for your guys' city positions, because that's one of the challenges. And I really want to applaud you guys for adding or potentially adding the liaison to schools. That is so needed. As you may have heard and seen, there was quite an ordeal this last year with trying to save a school from being closed. And I think that liaison with the schools would be a huge asset to not only the city, but the schools, to kind of keep that open dialogue between the two entities. I also want to say, in terms of cannabis, I really hope that you guys are considering that and working on that and come up with a more efficient plan than, say, the county, which has been changing the goalposts along the way, which has been really frustrating to those businesses. So I hope that you guys really emphasize the thought in that and making sure you have a succinct and collaborative plan between the businesses and the city and the county. And in terms of, I'm really glad to see that civic education that was on there. I think that is huge in trying to get your participation and your community involvement, and also helping to be able to raise up those future leaders in our community. So definitely continue to do that and to leverage your social media. Make sure when you're wanting to give those updates and highlights of what the city's doing and accomplishing, utilize that for that, not just for when there's meetings, but to highlight those and employees who are doing great things. One thing that wasn't touched on, but I think is huge, and I've emphasized it last year, was just healthcare. You guys can't control healthcare, but we do have an aging population. So being able to have properties that are mixed use and trying to help people to like recruit those medical practices to this area would be huge, because if anyone knows, trying to find a doctor can be quite challenging. So, but once again, thank you guys for allowing and having this virtually. And one more suggestion would be to have the slides available before the meeting, because that would be helpful for those who are participating to see that in advance. So once again, thank you, and you guys have a great afternoon.
Very good. Thank you for your comments.
Next is Stacy Jacob.
Welcome, Stacy.
Hello. Good afternoon, Mayor Martin and members of council. I'd like to just comment on some of the goals and various aspects. First and foremost, supporting local business in downtown. I think we learned a lot over the pandemic and would encourage permanent outdoor dining to be a focus as we look at moving forward. We looked at how successful this can be in our area, and hopefully something of that goal of bringing that working group and that committee together will continue as you move forward in your priorities. Fully support the economic strategy. Excited that this is moving forward. As Mr. Warner had mentioned, it's definitely time. And as this does move forward, kind of two things to think about in that sense. First and foremost, make sure that we support current industry to ensure success, the importance of tourism and the wine industry in that plan, and how we build lifestyle around those, and how we use the success of those industries to actually attract new business sectors. And in my mind, that's where the spaceport and the tech corridor come in. So looking forward to that process and that undertaking and getting that underway. Infrastructure is a big item, obviously, for many things as our community continues to go through growing pains. So fully support the funding needs for those bridges. Those will add in new infrastructure pieces as it relates to the circulation of our community, and also bringing in new tourism assets to the community. Two areas of infrastructure I'd like to add into the priority mix for consideration. The first is downtown lighting. Really looking at how I think there's kind of a couple things associated with lighting as it relates to not only the ambiance, but I think safety is a big part of that lighting piece. When you're in our downtown area at night, it can be quite dark, especially once all the cars go away. So I think it's something we should think about for the safety of our employees, also for the safety of our guests coming to the area, and of course our residents as well. The other area of infrastructure is taking the wayfinding signage that was put up about a year and a half ago, and looking at what gaps are potentially out there and how do we fill in those gaps. Specifically, it was made reference recently, if you are trying to find Barney Shorts Park and don't know where it is, that corner there on Union Road and where you turn to Barney Shorts, what can we do for better signage in that particular area? So I think just looking at wayfinding signage and how do we help our residents and visitors get around in terms of the infrastructure side of things. As we look at housing and homelessness, I think it's really time to look at the unhoused population and put a strategy and plan in place. I agree with the comments that Mr. Butterfield had made, that the public, that private funds are being made. I too actually support Paso Cares and now Echo, but just personally in providing meals. The need is great, as we all know, but how can we align that with a clear strategy and plan, and also public funds that can help? This is not an area or problem that's going away, and it's something that I think, if not addressed, will have some unintended consequences as it relates to some of our key industry sectors, going back to that economic strategy side. So I see it as a threat if we don't get a plan and make this as a better priority overall. And then finally, just as we look at community agencies, partnerships and collaboration between Travel Paso, the Paso Wine Alliance, the PR Chamber, Main Street, and others, would just ask that we continue. We're actually doing some work with these groups to bring together more collaboration, foster better communication amongst these, but also ask that we foster that collaboration and communication with these agencies and city leadership in hopes of securing sustainable funding for these agencies, and also really encourage you to utilize these agencies and engage with them as you identify your goals and priorities, so that together as a community we can generate results and move your initiatives as a community forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Next is Gina Fitzpatrick.
Gina, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Martin and council members. I am kind of laughing because my comments are very, very similar to Stacy's. So I'd like to first share that we're definitely in agreement with the priorities that she's noted, specifically the updating of the economic strategy, the infrastructure. I'd like to include the, I'm calling it the gateway, but the 46 entrance on the east side, as well as the comment that she made regarding the unhoused population. I know that others have made that as well, and I saw that in the public comment through the on the agenda. And then the comments made about tourism. We know that tourism, all aspects of it, meaning increasing tourism as well as over tourism, is a topic that's often heard in discussion in our community in Paso Robles. So the chamber would like to see our council place a priority on a thorough analysis and review of the impacts of tourism. I think it's been quite a while since we've all sat down together collectively and really looked at what those numbers are and what it brings to our community and what that means for the folks in our community when we have more money for roads and safety. I think it's really important that we all see that. And then this will ensure that we can continue to bolster and elevate our current offerings if the city is reinvesting back into the tourism infrastructure. It's, to me, critically important that we look at this from a holistic, take a holistic approach, and everybody that all hands on deck are able to see the improvements that tourism has brought to our community, and let's respond to the needs of the community as well in all of this. Main goal of turning and increasing revenue for our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Do we have anyone else waiting online?
Next caller is Jean Surge.
Welcome.
Hello. I just want to thank you for this opportunity. It's wonderful to hear a variety of ideas from my fellow Roblins. And I'm a retired teacher and have lived in Paso for 30 years, and I appreciate you leading us to the future. And I just want to first applaud the library. Under COVID, they've been doing takeaway programs, and I just wanted to give them a big thank you for that. I think the Echo Homeless Shelter or the Echo Homeless Motel 6 situation, or any support we can give to Echo, has been really important. I used to ride my bike from Paso Robles to San Miguel, and I would see people in the river living and coming out to actually go to work. So to give them an opportunity to have shelter and go to work is a wonderful thing. So I want to continue to support Echo Homeless, the collaboration with them. I want to encourage you to keep paving our streets one by one and taking that on and making sure all streets are covered. I drive up and down 17th a lot, and wow, it's pretty awful. I do want to thank you, too, for the senior parking that you provided earlier. My father is 93 years old. There was no way he could sign up with his cell phone, or it was really even hard to understand how to get a ticket out of the booth. So I really appreciate that you had the senior pass, and I hope that you will continue with that in some form. I realize it didn't work perfect, but I don't want it to go away, so I thought I'd just throw that out there. And I think for the infrastructure, tourism isn't really going to go away, and our downtown is quite packed, which is a wonderful thing if you've lived here a long time and seen it vacant and now see it just hustle and bustle. I just would like you to maybe review a city like Laguna Beach, who has a trolley that does a continuous loop, and it's safe because you don't have to you don't have to park, you don't have the hassle of parking. It can be for locals to use to get across town, and you could think of various ways to pay for it. If we could look at Laguna's situation and grants, it might be something that's possible. So I really just wanted to thank you for all you're doing. Being a retired teacher, I know that you do a ton of work and you don't always get a lot of thanks. You usually get a lot of criticism. So thank you so much for all the time that you put in and listening to everybody and really taking into consideration our future and where we're headed. And we're a wonderful city, and let's keep it that way. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
No other callers.
We have no one else waiting online. I'm going to close public comment, bring it back to the council. Remind everyone we're talking now about goals. We've had a report on our previous goals, our progress toward those goals. And in this portion of the conversation, we're going to be talking about whether we're going to change, modify, or add to those goals. This is sort of like a wide mouth funnel. We start very general up here, and then as we move into the process, we get closer and closer to the end stage, which will be our staff bringing back to us at some time in the future a more detailed budget reflecting the goals and strategies and policies that we talk about today. So comments from council members. I know that the input from the public has helped clarify some of my thinking in these areas, but I'm happy to reserve my comments until last. So who would like to go first? Mr. Gregory.
I've got a short list of 140 items here for you, so I'm just kidding. I would like to first thank the public, everybody in the public that's participated thus far, and I hope that our city can allow more comments to come in after today. A lot of people weren't able to make it today, so I think that'd be really good. So I'm gonna, I've heard about it recently. I really want to get the downtown improvements for more lighting, more festive lighting. I don't know, somebody on staff's already working on it, but I think it's magical when a city is well lit up, and that would go along with the Black Oak Road area, lighting that up too, and passages. I think that's really a wonderful thing. I think one of the things, and I don't know how to incorporate this in our goals, but Mark Dart said a statistic, and I'm hearing this all the time. We have the highest percentage of youth in our community in the county. And I think it's really important to help accommodate the youth in different ways, maybe even, I don't see Dale, but even with Art. But I think it's really important for us to keep focused on it. And I don't know, other than just saying, let's help embellish our youth as a goal. And it can be well-rounded with recreation and art and protection and homelessness, everything, all those ranges of things. I really like to continue our work on broadband as our community, as our staff is doing, and I want to emphasize that. I want to talk about housing a little bit, and it's one of my most important goals for the city. We've come a long way. And I want to promote housing, and then I also want to work on an aspect of housing for the homeless, like a small houses homeless project that I think we could integrate into our work with ECHO possibly, or with self-help housing. And then my final comment, I'd like to continue to focus our efforts with ECHO as a partner in our battle with homelessness to help those folks come out of the river and get into our community, into our homes. I think that we've been able to achieve remarkable efforts with our homelessness and our population here in our town in the last 18 or 19 months, with ECHO being present and doing the work that they do. And I think it's really important for our city to support those needs. Mr. Butterfield said it very well, and for us to get comments and participation and funding from people to give money to help support the homelessness, we need to provide money ourselves. And I think it's really important, I think, for overall help for our community. I'd like to make another comment, and that is, I think that our city is doing really, really well, and these goals are really important to talk about. But I very seldom have been in a place in my life where I've seen a public entity achieve as much as we do in our city. And I want to thank Warren and Mr. Starnetta, and without his uniform, and our new police chief. I want to thank Mr. Leckel. Everybody on this team is amazing. And the things that we achieve because we're working in community and a really good effort to make our community better. And I just can't say enough about how I've been on the council a very short time in years, but what we've accomplished as a community to make us a better place to live is amazing in that time. And we have a great opportunity right now with our economy starting to boom. It's already booming. We have a lot of money coming in from tourism and our tax dollars and our visitors, that I think it's really important to grasp what we're doing in this event, and of talking about our goals and focus on what keeps our community sound, safe, and a great place to live. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Hammond?
Yeah, I'll go around down the line. yeah, I want to echo Councilman Gregory again. My 16 years almost on this council, we've done a lot, we've dreamed a lot, we've accomplished a lot, and it all has to do with staff and the vision of the council that wanted to happen. And again, it is a happening thing. And I think it's good to have these kind of meetings where we dream a bit, we reaffirm our goals that we want to do. Some of the things I actually wrote down that we really haven't talked about, that we have in the past, but not really brought them up again, was things like the parking structure, which is going to help the downtown immensely. And I think if we were to nail a good parking structure, we already have time parking on the streets, which is always the first step. And now if we take it to the next level where we do have a structure where we can identify where everybody can, both workforce and also all the people coming downtown can park easily, that's going to be a huge feather in our cap for the downtown and the economy in general there. I think it's important that we never lose sight of that goal, that we want to try and do that. And it also dovetails back into the fact that we've always talked about, leaving this building and doing our own city hall. We've not talked about that for a while either. And it could be a combination project. We have the property right out here in our parking lot that was originally designed for a parking structure, and we might be able to put our new city hall in there and move out of, our upstairs and give it back to the library, which was always a goal. We need to keep that on the table, I think is what I'm trying to say. And the other thing is, we talked about a conference center for the North County. And I think we may have lost an opportunity with the property sale down there at Pioneer Park, giving it to the fairgrounds. But places like that where we can have, or either partner with them too, but have a facility where we can have huge gatherings, both cultural, art, business. There's immense things, and there really isn't a place in the county that really has one like that. And if we were to nail that too, again, just something to keep on our table here that I think we want to try and think about and never lose sight on. It's a big, far out goal, but especially the parking and the city hall, I think we need to bring that up and discuss. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Strong?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to agree with Councilman Hammond, at least on his city hall thing. I think that's something we do have to look at out here in our parking lot, and possibly parking structure. I think the problem with parking structure is cost. But if we combine it with something like that, that would be fine. And if we look at the history of other cities that have put in parking structures, they had to have paid parking for many years and establish a track record of income in order to bond, because they're so expensive to build. And then if you're going to have paid parking on the street, then you've got to have paid parking in the structure, and that means staff, and that means a lot of other things. So I'm not that wild about putting that on a 2-year goal at all at this point in time. I think we could do it to some extent right here in our back on our parking lot, current parking lot, and accomplish some of that. Other than that, I enjoyed Dale's comments. And I have to say, I fled Wisconsin. He's going to Wisconsin, so that's his choice. But I also have to say, we are truly a balanced community. And there are private responsibility areas and there are public responsibility areas. And some of these things have to be done by the public. It's our job possibly to enable them to do it. And I think that's what we have to look at in our goals, is how do we enable some of these things to happen that really are the private sector's responsibility or ability to do if they so choose. But we can't form the entire society in exactly how it's going to work. It's working very well right now with everybody cooperating, and that's what we have to keep going. All of us working together in our own areas of expertise and responsibility. Airport access. And I understand very much how Dale feels, the other Dale. And however, I have to say that number one, that's a state highway, and Caltrans has made it very clear they are not going to allow any traffic signals on that highway. No more, not at all. And they'd like to get rid of the ones they have. In fact, they'd almost like to get rid of this whole segment in the city and give it to us. But in the meantime, we have a number of situations up there that are really important, especially more important perhaps now.
Historically, we are facing a possible fork in the road historically, as has been shown in the last few days internationally. And this may affect us right down here in our local government. We better be aware of that and at least have some contingency concerns about it. And I'm very concerned about it because I've lived through everything since I'm old enough to actually remember Franklin Roosevelt declaring World War II. So that makes me a really old guy, but it also means I understand the realities of war and of losing family members to war. So let's be very cautious and realize that we have a gem in our airport, and they know it nationally. And the reality is that's a military highway. It currently takes convoys right down that highway now. And as a military highway, it has a military purpose. And that military purpose means they need good access, and they don't want that road clogged if they have to move troops on it, if it comes to that. And if we keep that in mind, that opens up even more funding possibilities. And we can't ignore that fact that that is a military and already a declared military highway, and take advantage of that to the extent I say take advantage, actually help our government and our entire country and the world by recognizing that fact and making use of it in how we proceed up there, and provide also the opportunities that will near the airport for businesses that may be remote objects of other high target areas, if it ever comes to that, where they can function down here as well. IT has to be paid attention to. If anybody is watching the news right now, the Russian advance was disrupted dramatically by a few private citizens who hacked into their IT system and disrupted their communications so that they couldn't tell the troops where to go and what to do. And there's a good possibility that IT may be targeted by those who don't like us. So I trust that we're going to pay some attention to our IT and making sure our security is really top notch. The cannabis. Okay, it's something that people voted on. They passed it. Our citizens are buying it. They're just not buying it in Paso Robles. If they're buying it in Paso Robles, frequently they're buying it in the black market. And that's why I think we have to bring that back. And I think that has to be a higher priority on our list, because we need the funding too. Cannabis is very, very lucrative. And our people are giving that money to other jurisdictions. That money ought to be coming to our own jurisdiction. I like the idea of the small houses. And I advocated that some months ago, actually, because they're being done in other states right now. And they've got little small places that are actually mobile. You can set them up on some public property, and they're just small enough for a couple of people to spend overnight in. They can't spend all day in them because there's not much thing, but they can cook in them. They can sleep in them. They can stay in them and stay warm. And that would solve a lot of the homeless problem to some extent too. It's another approach we can make. And they're not very expensive. I mean, we're talking a few $1,000s, really that little, if you look at some of them that are available now. And I believe some of them have actually been produced in other countries too, that for export to here. The trolley is another thing I talked about a long time ago. And I think we have to consider that, because that's going to alleviate the parking structure situation as well, and the parking. And one of the things I was hoping to do is convince Waymo to have a demonstration driverless trolley function here in our city, just to show what they can do and what their technology is capable of. I'm not sure we can do that. They're already doing it now in the East Bay, so we kind of lost our chance on that one, because that's exactly what they're doing up there in the East Bay, is demonstrating those vehicles for eventual use. But I think there are other things. I do know from the RTA, and I sit on that board, as you know, that the trolleys we have available are really in bad shape. There would be heavy maintenance costs if we wanted to use any of the trolleys that are currently available locally. So if we're going to go trolley, we may have to consider what the cost of a trolley is to get something that isn't going to just nickel and dime us to death with maintenance. And but that's another thing, that it's part of the whole overall parking situation problem. Maria and I are working on the outdoor dining, and we're having a meeting Tuesday on that. And we will try to be working on that to take another look at how we can do that safely without impacting negatively some of our other amenities that we have. I think that just about covers all of my comments on what we do. I think what we're doing now is not really defining new goals, but rather indicating what we're looking at these goals to really be kind of the direction of the staff to bring back to us and indicate how we're interpreting some of the goals that are already here, but also to not neglect some of the things that aren't goals, but are absolutely essential to any of the goals that were happening. We have to take care of our core services first. And that's always number one, is you have to take care of your core services. And then these are the ambitions. These are the ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
Yes, thank you. I just want to say thank you to the staff for putting this together and also for all the callers that called in with their great ideas. We do live in a very beautiful community, and we have a lot of people that are always there to help us, especially with things like this. You know, they show how much they care and they're willing to participate in workshops like this. I just want to add a couple of things that maybe we didn't talk about today yet is one of the community partnerships that I think we as a city should be talking to is the Oxnard Mexican Consulate. They're actually here in Paso Robles this weekend. I think that sometimes I get phone calls from hotels. I get phone calls from restaurants. I get phone calls saying that they do not have enough staff to clean their hotel rooms. They don't have enough staff for restaurants. And I think that that's a partnership that we should have conversations with the Mexican Consulate, because people that want to come here and work need to renew their work visas. They need documents to be able to start businesses. They need documents to buy homes. They need documents to go get a driver's license. These are things that the Mexican Consulate does when they're here. I spoke to them last night. They have a new consulate, and I asked him if he would like to meet the mayor and city council. Every 2 years, they switch Mexican consulates and they move them around to different parts of the country. And so we have someone new now. I don't remember his name from last night because it was so loud. We were at street side last night. It was so loud in there. But the whole staff is here, and the staff themselves I've known them for 9 years. And so I think those are conversations that we should have with them. Another thing that I would like to add, for safety reasons, and I'm not sure if it would be in public safety or in the homeless, but there are other cities that have this program, which is called the safe parking. And, you know, right now there's so many that park at Walmart, at Albertsons, and it's up to, I see the owners of these facilities have to walk out there and literally tell the people that they have to move out. So they're able to park there overnight, but they have to move out. And these are people that don't have somewhere to stay, and they want somewhere safe that's lit up. And right now there's about 12 to 15 that park together so that they're safe at Walmart. And then every morning they have to leave the premises by 6 o'clock in the morning. And it's just the group is getting bigger. And I just feel that we should look into that. I know that when I was at the city council my first year, and I went to the city council conference, there was other cities there that had a safe parking program already. And I just feel that maybe we should look into that. Those are the two things that I wanted to add, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to add my thanks to staff and all the people who participated in public comment so far today. We have more public comment to come. This is a very large elephant we're grappling with, and we've been doing it 1 year at a time for a while because of the pandemic. We go back now to the 2-year budget cycle, so that forces us to look a little bit further into the future than we have in recent months. And you have to kind of shift mental gears to make that happen. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to take all the comments in as they've been made, also the presentation by staff, and ask myself the 30,000-foot questions. Are these the goal categories that we want to maintain in the future? before I get down into the weeds of should we hire this person, should we buy that wrench, are these the places we want to go? Are these the directions we want to go? And I think that the goals categories that were presented earlier still hold pretty true for our city. And as we've gone through the conversation regarding the different components that we've been working on in the past, we want to work on in the future, I kind of sift them out into those different silos to see if we can make sense and make something that has some logic to it. So I want to start off in each one of those silos and see where I can put those ideas that have been expressed into the appropriate areas so we can give our staff some general direction on how to organize their work and how to go forward in the future. First of all, economic development. I just want to make the comment that for at least 3 years now, and probably longer, but for at least 3 years now, there's been this buzz concept of regional economic development. We have organizations that are organized and making efforts to achieve regional economic development. Unfortunately, every time I ask what that means, there's no real answer to that question. And I think it's our challenge to be involved in regional economic development, but more to the point, it's our job to lead in regional economic development. And we can't do that helter-skelter. We can't say, oh, well, maybe this shopping center, maybe that barber shop, maybe that. We have to have a big concept for regional economic development, not just to make it successful for Paso Robles, but to make it successful for the region. Because as we are hearing from state and federal sources, if you want support in those areas, you have to have a broad-based consensus of support for these areas of regional economic development. So I would advocate for our city that we consolidate our economic development efforts in several different areas. We need a master economic development plan that would encompass the pursuit of the spaceport license that we've discussed for the last couple of months, that would encompass the addition of new broadband capacities in the city of Paso Robles. We've already had some success in that area. We need to leverage that and extend those broadband access facilities in the city. And also something that's been proposed, and that is to move ahead with our assessment of the role of cannabis in our community in the future. We had those discussions preliminarily before the pandemic. They came to a screeching halt. It's time to start up those discussions again. Just as a personal footnote to that, one of the big instigators of problems in our county and everywhere with the homeless, with all sorts of people, is the lack of mental health facilities and mental health treatment. And as we go forward with the discussion of cannabis, and we all like to see the dollar signs associated with cannabis, I would like to all of us keep in the back of our mind that some of this money could be dedicated to expanding mental health facilities and services for Paso Robles and San Luis Obispo County to mitigate some of those other societal needs. We need to continue our partnerships that have been so successful in the past. We have to continue to work with our chamber, our Travel Paso organization, our Paso Wine organization, the Main Street, and we need to amplify our efforts to engage the organization, the Hispanic Business Association. These are things that have proved successful for us in the past. They're very valuable tools both for those organizations and for the furtherance of economic development in the city. We can't stop doing that. We have to keep those associations strong. In the area of infrastructure, 2 words, streets and bridges. Anybody argue about that? Anybody think the street job is finished? I don't think so. I think we need to keep pushing on that. As was put forward also earlier, we have these bridge projects, which are incredibly important just for local access and safety, but also have a role in economic development. Because without the Huero Bridge and without the overpass on Highway 46, there will be no extensive development at our airport. There will be no spaceport. There'll be only a modified version of the landing, and other projects projected out there probably will either be abbreviated or abandoned altogether. We have to have a realigned airport road. We have to have those 2 bridges, or those discussions really have no point. Streets and bridges under infrastructure. Public safety, we continue to be challenged by recruitment, particularly in the area of the police department. We have to make sure that our salaries and benefits are competitive with other agencies. We need to make sure that we can recruit the right people to protect our citizens, and that needs to be a goal of our city, along with something we've already initiated, and that is making sure that we have the appropriate facilities for those departments. We have a fire department under construction right now. We have a substation for the police department that is in design. So we need to continue those areas for public safety. Also, we need to make sure that we have a strong liaison concept with the school district, because law enforcement and the school district have a role to play together. Housing and homeless. Again, this is an area where we need to take a lot of our efforts and put them under a master plan. We need to have a plan that addresses what I refer to as a continuum of housing. We've had comments about tiny houses. We have comments about safe parking. We have comments about homeless shelters. The fact of the matter is, we need a continuum of housing that begins at safe parking and ends at home ownership. We need to have people who have the option and the opportunity to move up that ladder. Somebody who can find shelter overnight and then once their lives are stabilized can move into temporary housing. Once their lives become more stable and they're able to earn more money, they move into a tiny home or a rental home. After that, they have the opportunity to buy a home. We don't do that. Every effort along the way is stalled. If there's no step up, if there's no next rung on the ladder, then it stalls out at that last rung. So we have to make sure that we have a continuum of housing in the city of Paso Robles. We need to maintain the partnerships we've had with People's Self-Help Housing, with HASLO, with ECHO, with the Paso Robles Housing Authority. They are critical and integral to our efforts to make sure that we have an adequate housing supply for everyone in the city of Paso Robles. And then under governance, I think that we need to make an extraordinary effort to expand our ability to communicate the city's efforts to our constituents and beyond. It's been mentioned earlier that we've done some incredible things in our city, and we kind of know about that because we're here every couple of weeks to talk about it. But for the folks that are tuning in for the first time, they may be having a big question mark over their heads about what exactly has the city done over the last 2 years. And so we have people on staff right now that are working very hard to get that information out. They need more support and they need more help to make sure that happens. And not just through traditional media. I'm an old media guy. I'm a radio, TV, print guy, but I'm smart enough to know that social media and social influencers are the way that most people get their information right now. And our city needs to get up to speed in that area and make sure that we're able to get the information out about the city, whether it's a positive story or in an emergency situation, get emergency instructions out to our citizens in a very short amount of time. So those are the goals that I would advocate the council support, and the sub goals or the policies under each that I would hope the council would support to give staff direction going forward. And I once again open the floor for discussion. Council, Mr. Gregory.
I would just like to add the trolley comment also, or electric vehicle, whatever, but moving between hotels and downtown. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, can I jump in? I know Mr. Gregory he needed a break, so I don't know if it's...
I'm so sorry. I thought I remembered to say that. Okay, so we're going to take a short break. We'll finish up council comments on this portion of the program when we get back. Thank you. Welcome back. Paso Robles City Council, Saturday, February 26th, our city budget planning session. We've just about finished the first half of this session. All of our council members had the opportunity to make their comments regarding the overall goals and policies, reflecting the directions we've taken in the past and hopefully incorporating the comments of public comment today. I finished up with my remarks. I did leave off one budget or one goal heading that I'd like to add, and that is quality of life. I want to make sure that we continue to pursue our library master plan, parks acquisition and maintenance, and obviously the program that Councilman Strong referenced earlier, and that's make plans for outdoor dining alternatives in our downtown. So with that, I'd like to open it back up for discussion with the council. My druthers would be that we do make a motion, first of all, if these goals headings seem appropriate to the council, to go ahead and make a motion incorporating those goals headings, and if you want to make changes to the different things that I put under it, that's fine. But if we can complete that, then we can complete this section of our discussion and move ahead to the next round. Mr. Gregory.
So it's going to be kind of a complex motion, but I'll move that we incorporate the programmatic explanation of our goals from our city and the recommendations of staff for some of the changes, and incorporate all of the discussion that the council had on potential changes or additions to the goal setting. Does that sound right to you?
I'll second. Okay, so I have a motion by Councilman Gregory, second by Councilman Strong. Further comment, Mr. Gregory?
No, if there's any modification from you, sir, I'd like to have that.
I was just going to ask, it's kind of a potpourri that you've said, right. Listen to everything we said and come up with something. and I get it if that's what the council wants to do, but I'd like to give a little more clarity if possible.
So I think that the number of items that were discussed, it's going to be difficult to cover all those. So we could come back with maybe a review of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know how to do it because this document's very lengthy.
Mr. Mayor, why don't we just take each slide? I mean, we all have right in front of us, with regard to the additional items that staff was proposing, the green lines, and maybe just go through them quickly. There's not that many of them. Can we kind of get a consensus overall from the council that this is agreeable? There's like probably 7 slides.
Well, I have a motion and a second. Unless somebody wants to withdraw, we're going to take a vote. Any further discussion?
No.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
Councilmember Strong?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Hammond?
Overall, I agree, but yes. Aye.
And Mayor Martin?
I would prefer more specificity, but I'll vote also. Aye. So it's 5-0. With that should conclude this portion of our presentation, correct?
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure that our city clerk is clear on the motion and for the wording of the minutes.
I'll go back and listen to the audio and make sure that it's as clear as mud in the notes.
Yeah. What I heard the motion say, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gregory, is y'all heard what we had to say. Make sense of it.
That we can do.
If you can
we'll
do that.
We'll collaborate on making that a little more clear for the minutes.
Okay, moving on then. Item number 2 on our agenda, City Council Budget Planning Workshop, and we now get further into the
Mayor Martin, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is there a way we can make this document available to the public?
I believe it was requested. It was placed on the website previously, right?
It will be on the website by Monday.
So incomplete. Okay, right. Thank you.
Yeah. So back to Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think based upon Mr. Hammond's comments and some of the information and feedback we received, that will accelerate or at least pivot on our presentation and have Mr. Cornell jump into the meat and potatoes of the budget and the overview, and then we can go back to some of the major themes and recap and close out the day.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. City Council, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Ryan Cornell, Administrative Services Director. I'm going to just jump right into it. look at general fund revenues, and pretty much the focus, at least on ongoing and operations, will be kind of on the general fund. The enterprise funds will be later on in the budget process. But this graph up here kind of represents the actual revenues the general fund has received since 2012, and kind of where we're projecting the revenues going moving forward. There's a little green line there on the chart. That was what we projected the revenues being about this time last year. So just right off the surface, you could see that we're a little bit more optimistic with our revenues forecast moving forward. Not a whole lot, but still a little bit more optimistic than we were this time last year. As you can see in 2020, fiscal year 2020, 2021, our revenue projections were grossly underestimated. We actually saw a significant amount of economic activity March through September of 2021. So when we kind of were projecting out the revenues, this was kind of before the major kind of rebound in our economy locally. So very good rebound in 2021. And another thing too, in 2021, there was some one-time revenues. We did sell a piece of property for a couple $1 million. So it's skewing it a little bit more of a kind of one-time revenues. But, just a kind of a quick little recap of where the general fund gets its revenues from. The lion's share of revenues come from three sources: sales tax, property tax, and transient occupancy tax, also known as hotel tax. So those three sources combined is roughly 75% of the overall general fund budget. And you add on the other taxes, the franchise fees, the business license, that sort of thing, that's 88% of the overall general fund monies comes from essentially taxes. So because such a large share of the revenue generations comes from these three sources, we like to dive in a little bit more detail on each one of these three sources. So going right into sales tax, this is just the 1% local sales tax that the city gets out of the 7.25 average. This does not include the supplemental overrides at all. So what's showing here is pre-pandemic, starting with pre-pandemic fiscal year 2019, we did see a decline in sales tax. It was anticipated right with the COVID-19 pandemic. But what is quite amazing and what's quite shocking is the rebound, right? The 18% coming out of the pandemic year. And then we're still seeing a very good, strong growth anticipated for this current year that we're in, another 7%. Staff, I'll get a little bit more details on the industry information, but it's not sustainable over the long term. We knew the economy downturn for a little bit, but it's rebounded back forward. And then kind of more just the typical growth moving forward, a very conservative 3% in the outer years on sales tax. But if you actually want to break down those into kind of each industry group, so when we chat with our HDL sales tax consultant, we talk about each one of these different categories and kind of broadband and really analyze what each of these industries are doing. So just starting from left to right, the first one is autos and transportations. Surprisingly, we never saw a decline in autos and transportation throughout the pandemic. That was kind of one of those head scratchers. But now we are dealing with supply chain issues and inventory issues. And so we actually are seeing a decline in sales tax revenues because of those issues. Now, the decline isn't nearly as significant as it could be because the cost of vehicles are also increasing too. So it's kind of helping offset the decline in sale volumes. But we're projecting next year those inventory issues will fix themselves out, and then we'll kind of see those typical annual increases on autos and transportations. The next three categories: building, construction, business, industry, and food and drugs. Not seeing a whole lot of change from one year to the next. We're kind of just anticipating those just very minor increases or staying flat. The next, what I want to chat about is fuel and service stations, and then restaurants and hotels, right? Those are kind of our tourism-related sales tax industries, and they've actually been the longest to recoup, right? They were the ones most heavily hit, right? Fuel and service stations, no one was even driving to work or commuting to work anymore, so they saw a significant decline. But they're finally kind of rebounding. They're a little bit delayed than the rest of the industry group, so we did see a nice little increase in 2022. And then this really is kind of our new starting off point for moving forward. And so we'll see kind of the slight increases again in the outer years. General consumer goods, again, it did see a decline because of the pandemic, but we're seeing a nice little rebound there. This is probably more attributed to the inflation because, the cost of goods go up, our sales tax is a percentage of the cost. And so our revenues are kind of showing that piece of it. But we're anticipating the inflation not being a multi-year issue. It's a kind of a course correction per se, and hopefully moving forward, things kind of stabilize. And then lastly, the state and county pool category, those are solely our online sales. And so I'm fortunate enough when the laws passed, the Wayfair decision passed, it was kind of right in the middle of the pandemic. So even though we saw a decline in economic activity because of the pandemic, we were actually able to collect sales tax revenues on some of our internet sales that we weren't previously able to. So it kind of softened that overall impact of the sales tax. But internet sales are exponentially growing. And so we're anticipating that to continue, that trend to continue moving forward. Oh, before I move on to it, and just to kind of give council an idea too of development, future development, we typically do not include any sort of construction or any development in the forecast until it's actually broken ground. And so even though we're kind of in the talks of looking at the landing project or the tech corridor or the spaceport, none of those potential revenues are anticipated in the forecast until we kind of get further down in the feasibility and planning stages. Moving on to property taxes, very similar to the prior graph, but unfortunately, property tax is a little bit different with Proposition 13. It really limits the city's ability to increase property taxes from one year to the next. So over the last 10 years or so, our property tax has averaged about 2.25% growth year over year. And so this is kind of that pretty steady revenue source and not really seeing a huge increase out in the future years, kind of that 2.5% to actually 4% increases in the future. We're hoping that once Olson South Chandler develops and when Beechwood develops, we'll start seeing significant increases in property taxes at that point in time. But again, until those projects break ground, we won't include those in the forecasted numbers. So for the most part, the increases in the outer years is basically attributed to the growth that we are able to add on property tax, but then also the turnover in our inventory of our homes, because right as soon as the house sells, it kind of resets its base value, and we're able to kind of tax at that sell price. And then lastly, looking at our transient occupancy tax, or TOT, and when we talk about V economies, this is very clear of this is what happened in our tourism industry where COVID, we couldn't travel, we couldn't go anywhere in April 2020, and we saw a decline of 18% of revenue in our TOT pre-pandemic going into the pandemic. But then, as you can see, in fiscal year ending 2021, we had a 40% growth. So a much bigger rebound than anticipated, because obviously the line is the kind of our last year revenue projections. So at last year, we were thinking that it was going to take a little bit longer to recoup, but then we'd see pretty good acceleration in year 3 and 4. It seemed to flip-flop. So what we kind of did on the forecast is, okay, well, we have a new base starting, but we're going to kind of be a little bit more conservative on what we're thinking in the future, since we already had that bounce back already. Another thing to note too is even in this current fiscal year in 2022, we're seeing a 7% increase off of that 40%. So again, the tourism industry is robust. It's doing very, very well. Okay, and then moving on to general fund expenditures. So it's very similar to the revenues. We have actual expenditures, and this includes both one-time expenditures to our Section 115 trust, some of our discretionary payments to CalPERS, and then some accounting changes too. You're kind of realizing, and I'll kind of dive into those in a second. But just generally speaking, where does the city spend its dollars? And in these pie charts, I've excluded the capital transfers, and I've excluded the CIP dollars. So we're just really looking at operations only. And, on the left-hand side is by department, on the right-hand side is kind of by object or by what it actually is. So on the left-hand side, right, the biggest department in the city is the police department, followed closely by the fire department. They almost make up half of what the city spends its dollars on. And then the rest of it is all community services with public works on the streets and the street crew, the community services, which includes library, recreation, and park and facility maintenance, and then community development. But because we are a service agency, that's the majority of where our expenses go is to paying people and paying people salary and benefits. It's at 67% on just the operations. Now, if we were to add in the capital investments that we make every year, that percentage actually drops down to closer to 55%. So that's kind of a very typical structure of a city. But just to kind of go a little bit more detail of when we forecast expenditures, what's actually included and what's not included. So first and foremost, we take current staffing levels as they are today, and we project those out. So this doesn't include any additional positions. It doesn't include any sort of promotions or reclassifications. The wages are also based on the current MOUs, and the MOUs for each of our labor bargaining groups expire at the end of this calendar year. So we shortly thereafter, or probably in parallel to this budget process, will be engaging in labor negotiations with each one of our labor groups. We did add a new element in the forecast that has, we've been kind of tinkering with the idea, but it's actually in there now, is including a line item for budget savings. We know that in any given year, we're never 100% fully staffed, and we constantly are turning over employees and recruiting. So it's a very, even at 95%, it's a very conservative number that we know typically that we'll have at least 5% savings in personnel. What's kind of a benefit of that is that 5% is a big dollar. So where we were really trying to utilize as much of the ongoing revenues as we possibly can there. The baseline budgets, the operating expenses, kind of don't assume any major changes to the programs. So, I know we had a very long discussion on goals. So if we were to add a program or really try to achieve those goals, it's going to change the baseline and operating expenses assumption. And then just, for council to know too, as I report out in future budget sessions, if these operating expenses start changing, we're still kind of fine tuning them, right? We're just doing this is our very first preliminary look at where we're at on things. So as we kind of start talking with departments and the functions and the new expenses that, that they've incurred over the last couple of years, those will probably get fine tuned and adjusted. Next is the Measure E12 supplemental sales tax. That's the 2012 measure that goes directly to our street and road maintenance. That has an automatic sunset in March 31st, 2025. So the forecast assumes that those revenues will no longer be renewed. But however, we still want to maintain the $5 million in street maintenance programs that's funding. So when we get kind of the numbers, you'll kind of see in that last year of the forecast a very significant decline in revenue, and our kind of revenues over expenses decreases significantly too. Yeah, I'm not saying that that's actually what would happen if it doesn't get renewed. It's just more kind of showing if we're trying to maintain our current service levels, this is kind of where we're headed. Okay. And then lastly, the capital projects that are included in this is pretty much only the roads, the half-cent sales tax to the roads, and then some monies towards ADA transition. So as we're starting to talk about infrastructure and bridges, none of those are included in the forecast either.
Ryan, real quick question. I'm back on the personnel, that 67%. Was that fully loaded that you had on that pie chart?
Yes, that's, yeah, salary and benefits.
Did that include anything on that pension trust that we have, including, or is that a separate fund?
So the salary and benefits includes our minimum required payments to CalPERS, not anything over and beyond what has been.
Not what we're putting in our pension trust that we have our own.
Yeah, so we do have a Section 115 pension trust. We've been funding it kind of at one time at our 1 year at a time. This current year in 21-22, we're funding about $400,000 towards that, but nothing's planned in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so back to the expenditure chart, and I know where it was a kind of a big discussion about, okay, well, let's kind of remove one-time expenditures and kind of take a look at that. So this is kind of this is my attempt to visually show that. So same graph, but then the larger graphs are kind of the ongoing expenses. The the green pieces are the capital investment, and the blue are truly the one-time, and it's basically the 115 trust. Remember, we did kind of $3 million a few years ago to the 115 trust. And so that's what I was trying to visualize here of kind of where we're at on ongoing revenues, or I'm sorry, ongoing expenditures. One thing to note, though, in 2019, right, there's a big increase, right? That's the biggest year of expenditures that the city has in the last 10 years. And there was a major accounting change in that. And so previous to 2019, we accounted for all the city's capital projects in the general fund. And as you know, the capital projects takes multiple years to construct. And so even though we might fund a project completely in the first year, it might take 3 years to build. And so in all actuality, the capital transfers that's shown before 2019 should have been more, because really we budgeted for them to be fully complete in that whole year. Well, in 2019 is when we created that capital improvement program fund, a whole standalone fund. And so then we moved all of the available budget that was already appropriated out of the general fund and moved it to that other fund so that we could keep ongoing revenues and ongoing expenses kind of segregated from one another. So really, when you kind of look at the next slide I'm about to show, really kind of focus in on 2020 and beyond, because that's really kind of what we're looking for as far as ongoing revenues versus ongoing expenses. And even though capital technically isn't an ongoing expense, I think there still is a responsibility for the city to fund some sort of capital projects ongoing, right? So that's what we're kind of seeing there. So the gap between the line and the top of the bar chart there is kind of the revenues in excess of expenditures. And as you can see in this forecast, we're seeing that revenues will exceed expenditures as they are today. Now, we know based on the goals and the priorities, there's a lot of needs that are going to kind of suck up our resources. And in all actuality, we have the ability to do some, but we don't have the ability to do everything. So this is the similar slide to the bar chart. It actually just puts better numbers to it. So last year and this year, we're kind of projecting that we'll have surpluses about right around $4.5 million. Carrying forward that is kind of similar trend into the next 2 year cycle, where we're seeing a $5 or $6 million of availability to expand our programs. And then, as I said, Mr. Hammond, when in fiscal year 25-26, when the E12 expires completely, the surpluses, we still see revenues over expenses, but it's only at $2.5 million versus kind of the $5 to $6 million we're seeing today. So again, just kind of to reiterate, yes, we have this discretion, but like I had mentioned, the labor groups or the labor contracts are expiring at the end of this calendar year. There is needs to expand our staffing levels and our service levels in some certain areas. Capital improvements is going to be a big thing. Infrastructure, the bridges is going to be continuing to talk about. Like I just mentioned, any new initiatives or goals that the city council comes up with that we need to fund. And then kind of more of a not as a higher priority this year as it has been in the past, but our long-term liabilities, our UAL, our PERS obligations, right? It's always kind of been a concern of late, but in combination of a good return on investment year last year with CalPERS, plus what we have in the 115 trust, it's actually, we're pretty good on our pension. I think we're about 85 to 90% funded on our pension now. So we're doing, obviously 100% would be the best. Yeah. So, but we're doing very well there. And then this is my last slide. So this is kind of a snapshot of reserves. And so on the left-hand side is our general fund reserves. They're hovering just under $30 million, which, like I had mentioned, is going to approach 50% if it's not over 50% now. The council fiscal policy has a minimum requirement reserve policy of 25%. And so as we're kind of predicting at the end of this year, we'll be about $17 million over our minimum required reserve policy. Measure J20 because it's been kind of a slower process to get the police officers and the firefighters hired and getting those salaries expended. Well, we're going to kind of see a fund balance kind of growing in that bucket of money to about $4 or $5 million at the end of this year, as it kind of anticipated to be available for spending. I didn't include Measure E12 reserves there too, because I don't know if you remember, but you had approved a 6-year street plan back in February in 2020. And that 6-year street plan pretty much encumbers all of the remaining E12 monies that are going to be available in the future. Don't want to forget about ARPA. That is the federal stimulus monies that President Biden had passed. We have about 4.7 that's kind of loosely committed to infrastructure progress, but infrastructure projects, but nothing definitive there. Back in 2019-20-ish, we established a new fund, again, a facility replacement or a deferred maintenance for our facility fund. We kind of did one-time funding to that fund, and we've been kind of slowly chipping away at that and improving our facilities. But there's about $300,000 left in that pot of money. That is unrestricted general fund monies. It's just kind of been dedicated towards building and facility maintenance right now. And then we kind of get into our restricted funds, right? Our development impact fee funds. And so the city collects on 5 development impact fees: public safety, transportation, parks and rec, library, and general government. Those are kind of the funding levels on all of those fees. You'll see that the transportation impact fee is shown is negative. It's not truly negative. That just means that we've over budgeted the funds available, because again, we know that some of these larger these bridges take several years to construct. And then very lastly, on the very far right of this bar graph, we do have some fund balances on the gas tax and SB1, about $1.92 million there. And that bucket of money is usually what DEETA's used for kind of her minor repairs, her striping, her hot spots, and that sort of thing. So we do have kind of an ability to expand there. And those funds are restricted on streets and roads solely. So I know I talked really, really quickly and I threw a lot of information out there. So that actually concludes my portion of this presentation. So happy to answer any questions.
So let's go there first. Any council questions on the financial report, Mr. Hammond?
Yeah, Ryan, I'm curious again on J20 money. What's the percentage? Where's it going? In other words, we talked about streets, police, and fire. What percentage is kind of divvied up right now?
So I don't know the specificities on the percentages, but I do know that on the police side of it, it included 7 officers and a dispatch supervisor and a records clerk. On the fire side, it included 6 firefighters and 1 administrative captain. And on the streets, it was 2 additional street personnel, and plus kind of the funding shortfall on the E12 program. That was actually kind of a big piece of it. I think it's about $2.3 million that's going towards this.
Okay, what I'm trying to get an idea is, what percentage of the funds are going where? In other words, how much are going to police? How much are going to fire? How much are going to streets? Do you have that kind of idea of what breakdown? No. As I throw a curveball.
Well, I know where the information is because we just had the supplemental sales tax oversight committee. So on the police side, where we only have the dispatch supervisor currently filled out of that position. So there's salary savings on the police side of it because she's the only one that's currently being utilized on the J20 funds. On the fire side, we have all 6 firefighters on board now too, more recently. So they're fully staffed in, and we're anticipating the admin captain being on board at the end of March too. So fire should be fully staffed based on their plan. And then on the street side, those 2 individuals are hired, and they've been hired all year too as well.
Okay.
But and then I also want to note too that even though J20 is an unrestricted tax, it is accounted for in a whole standalone separate fund now too. So any unspent monies from J20 is sitting in reserves, and that's why I showed it as a kind of a separate reserve balance.
Yeah. No, my point is that I out of that incoming amount, I just want to know what the percentages were going to basically the 3 areas that we wanted to support, and might get that to me later if you don't mind. I'd kind of like to see where that is. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions about the financials? Mr. Gregory?
Yeah, so Ryan, just to clarify on the J20, you also have several $1 million for the firehouse, for the fire department building.
Yes, yes, that's thank you, Mr. Gregory. Measure J20 is funding a majority of the construction of the building of Fire Station number 3 on Union Road. Actually, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, I was able to pull it up.
Sure.
So as of right now, the The police department has spent $245,000 out of the $1.8 million allocation it received in J20, so that's about 14% of its appropriations. The fire department has spent $1.3 million out of their $7.7 million appropriation, but no, $7 million of that is the fire station. So they spent about 17% of their funds. And then lastly, streets, they had an appropriation of $2.8 million. And they've spent $66,000 to date on just those 2 staff members, pretty much, because the E12 program hasn't needed any of the money quite yet. So
really
they're at 2.4%.
It hasn't been programmed to where to put that money at, or DETA's.
No. We have the streets identified.
Okay.
Already of what they're going to fund. They're just not under construction quite yet.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Strong.
Oh, I had some more questions. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We'll get back to you. Hang on.
On this chart we're looking at now, Ryan, is the half-cent sales tax on here?
No, the half-cent sales tax is not included because in February 2020, when council approved the 6-year street plan, it utilized 100% of the remaining funds.
So that's all basically gone.
It's all kind of already earmarked. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And if I can just go back to the slide where it says budget report and projections. Oops, they all say that. General fund bar graph.
Which on expenditures?
One more, that one. So I'm just looking at the graph, and the green line is the projected revenues, and the top of the bar graphs are the projected expenditures, right?
So the bars are expenditures. So these are actual expenditures from 2012 to 2021, right? Because these years are over. So these are actual expenditures. These are actual revenues.
Yeah.
So that,
and then forecasted out, these are what we're thinking the expenditures will be.
So you have a little bit of a conservative buffer surplus every year for the next 4. Okay. And then 26 is actually showing the half-cent sales tax being gone.
Correct.
Okay. That were my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Strong.
And that comes close to what I was confused about, the very first bar graph, general fund revenues, because every other bar graph I saw right after that showed an increase in just every area, and yet we're showing a decrease on that graph.
The very first graph should have a decrease too. Let's see. Oh, that's expenditures.
General fund revenues, right after your opening page. Yeah, no. Now you're getting
right
there. There it is.
Now
see how we dip in 2022? And 2023, you're just barely getting back up to 2021. And yet every other graph after that showed an increase in every area of income.
Sure. In 2021, we did sell property. It was the River Lodge property for about $2.5 million. So there's one-time revenues that's included in this 2021 number.
Oh, okay. So it's a one-time revenue.
The last slide that kind of overlays the revenues and expenses tries to take out all the one-time stuff.
Otherwise, we are actually rising every year except for that item. Okay, very good. And then I was wondering, how often do we recalculate some of these graphs? And frankly, I'm looking at our budget report and projections for transient occupancy tax. And I'm thinking of one of our national TV hosts who yesterday morning was complaining about the world situation preventing her from going to her resort in Europe. And that means she's going to have to go somewhere in the United States, I guess. So I hope we're going to recalculate this as to what we might expect. Thank you.
Yes,
that's all.
Okay. Any other questions? None? Do you have further presentation?
I had a question.
John.
Maybe Warren can help me on this one too. And we've had several hotels approved. Where are they in the pipeline? I mean, the one I'm thinking now is out there at the end of Union Road. The other one's on South Vine. Are they in the holding pattern, or is there any progress happening on those? Or
yeah, before the pandemic, I think we approved about 1,000 additional rooms. Most of those were going through the plan check process when COVID hit. That disrupted all the funding. So all the hotel projects kind of came to a halt. It looks like now, though, that most of them are starting to move forward. We see them back in plan check. So we do believe the Residence Inn project which is on South Vine Street. That's probably going to be the first one. That one's pretty close to, being able to issue that one. The Fairfield Inn out by Barney Schwartz is in plan check. That one's getting pretty close as well. Hotel Ava that broke ground over on downtown at the Hayward lumber site. They've contacted us recently. They're getting ready to restart. And then there's a handful of other projects that are also moving forward. So it would appear likely that at least 3 more hotels probably get built in the next 2 to 3 years. And it's possible it could be a few more than that even.
Really? And so that's why I know we don't count those eggs before they're really hatched at this point. I mean, you're not in these calculations, right, Ryan?
Correct.
So in the next 3 to 4 years, we might see even a higher spike on TOT. So.
Yeah, and then that's really the purpose of forecast, right? Is just what are the environment today, and kind of look out, and as information, and the new information comes to light as we move down, we'll update the model and
that's why I asked Warren, because he knows what's coming, and I just we haven't really heard about it at this level much. Planning Commission knows.
Councilman Gregory.
Warren, can I have you come back up? I just had a quick question. When there's good news, I just want to make sure you spread it around. So the motel project at 46 West in the front.
The River Lodge?
They're moving on it, huh?
Well, yeah, they've been under construction for a while. It's kind of right now they're working on kind of the demo parts of the project, but they do have their permits in to reconstruct. They're going to be adding 2 or 3 additional rooms. They're turning into basically a 4-star spa resort type facility. They'll be restoring the historic sign, redoing a whole new pool, outdoor lounge area. It's really going to be a really cool, unique, boutique, vintage motel project.
Now I see they also bought the farmhouse motel, and they're doing that.
They did.
So it looked like somebody I wasn't aware of who bought that.
It was them. I just wanted.
And I think that's it. And that's what's really nice about Paso is we have a variety of different lodging opportunities. So the old strip motels that have kind of been forgotten have now been rediscovered. And that's just another unique thing that we have. So I think restoring all the Spring Street motels, as well as building these new hotels, is really going to make this a popular place for a lot of people.
Do we also have vacation rentals pretty much up on the list? Are there vacancies on those at all?
We've maxed out all the permits, and now we have a standing waiting list. Short-term rentals are doing very well.
So remodel also means nice increase on TOT?
Yeah, I think, that Stables project used to be, I think, the Paso Robles Inn. It was kind of like a 1-star kind of thing. We used to get complaints about it. Gilson bought that, redid it, and instantly overnight, I think it went from $90 a night to probably $300 or $400 a night.
Good. Thank you, Warren.
Any other council questions? Anything else, Mr. City Manager, before we open up public comment?
No, not in the way of the budget. We do have the theme portion of our presentation to go. It's a little bit a recap of some of the things we've talked about, but now that you have a little more context and where we've been, what the budget looks like, what the future looks like, then we can wrap up with some of these major themes that you'll be seeing us incorporating into our work plans as we move forward.
Okay, so why don't you do that, and we'll take public comment on the whole shooting match.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Could I open it and crack the door a little bit on something that I think ties in with Ryan and essentially his finances with regard to big projects. We talked about it a lot, and kind of together here, bonding, funding. How much do you think we could ask the public to buy into? I mean, these are big projects like we did before with our fire station, the bridge, and all these things that Paso has embraced as a community to get behind and make happen. When you get such huge infrastructure costs, the Ware Bridge, the 46 East, Vine Street, all these things are big ticket numbers, which budget like this would never going to be able to support. We're going to have to go somewhere else. Can you elaborate on might be some of the funding tools that might be possible that we could ask the public to consider?
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for the question, Mr. Hammond. So obviously we've been very focused today on tax revenues as our main source of income. for the city, and covering our day-to-day expenses plus some of those ones that we plan. Some of the things that we mentioned, which will be in this themes portion of it, are what I've kind of been referring to as generational items. So when you talk about a $25 million Wero Bridge, a $50 million Highway 46 overcrossing bridge, or a $10 to $12 million bridge at the Gateway, those are going to kind of set the tone for our traffic circulation, our development for years to come, whether it's spaceport, whether it's a tech corridor, or any of the other commercial and industrial uses that we're looking at. Those are going to be critical to relieving. We're pushing probably 2 million visitors a year just that are coming for tourism purposes, let alone our big economic strategy of diversifying our jobs base, our economic sources, our income. So when you talk about bonding, yes, I think that is something that council has discussed loosely in the past, if that's the right word. I think that one of the things that we're going to have to consider is the balance between looking at the options to increase TOT, if that's something that the council is interested in. Of course, that's probably the smallest area of revenue when you talk about increasing some sort of tax related to tourism. And Mr. Cornell can probably speak to those numbers. I think 1% equals somewhere between 500 and 700,000 a year. When you look at a sales tax increase, so we have the road tax that's getting ready to expire in a couple of years. 1.5% on that generates about $5 million a year. So that's going to be that's been a huge funding source for us to make as much progress as we have on the roads. So that's going to be another decision point. How does that impact our ability to bond? The appetite for the community, the voters, the council, everybody when it comes to either renewing that, or do we consider wrapping all of that up into some sort of geo bond, which is probably something that the community is somewhat familiar with too. So when we talk about a geo bond, it's a general obligation bond, and you can set that rate to help finance some of these big projects. So for instance, if we were successful, as Mr. Strong pointed out, in getting federal money, military money, or state money to help us build some of those, we could still use a bond opportunity to quote unquote hit the go button, the green button on all of our streets, repairing all of those kind of things, which has been at the top of, I think, our community's list year after year after year, followed closely by public safety. So those two areas have been a focus for a long time. Certainly, we have some challenges when it comes to funding these, and those kind of opportunities are something that we're exploring. Council directed us a couple staff meetings ago to look into that. We've met with some consultants recently to try and lay the groundwork for that. So one of the things that we'll talk to council about in the very near future is the opportunity to kind of ping our voters and see if they would actually support one or multiple combinations of those, and bring those options back to council to consider. Certainly, parking structures, there's a lot there, over $100 million worth of investment in the community that's potential. How and when we do that is something that, will be a point of conversation for the council and the community in the next few months.
Very good. I think we need to keep it on tape. Thank you, Ty.
Okay. Themes or priorities.
Okay, if we can go to the first slide there. So as we've kind of recapped on some of these, one of the big themes that we're looking for, we've heard council's feedback on this. We've heard feedback from Travel Paso, Wine Country Alliance, the Chamber, other regional partners such as REACH, as well as our other city partners and municipalities throughout the county, is the need for all of us to have economic development strategies strategies. The city has one. It's more than a decade and a half old now at this point, and it's not necessarily reflective of where our community is today with respect to economic development. This document's important on several fronts because it will really guide us strategically and help us make our decisions on where we want to see the community grow, what opportunities we might have, and where we want to apply our funding, which we know is limited. Some of the things that staff identified with the aid of council at this point in the community, one of them we're already underway on is looking at the spaceport feasibility and the application process. We're about ready to get feedback on the very first funding opportunity that council provided to get phase 1 of this feasibility study done. We're planning a joint session of the City Council, the Airport Commission, as well as the Planning Commission at the end of March to discuss this in more depth. But what's become apparent at that is that there's going to be more questions that are going to be raised. How does that transform our airport? How do we create a tech corridor out of that? And how do we get this potentially community transformational project across the finish line, which includes getting that application process there. And I think the other big part of that is if we do move forward with the spaceport and we're talking about budgeting and planning, it's understanding what the real costs are going to be, not only on a recurring basis, but are there any costs that are going to be required by the FAA or other entities to make sure that our spaceport meets standards and of course gets that application approved. We talked a little bit about the tech corridor. We're going to need funding for that at some point when we talk about master planning and development, road improvements, adding fiber. When I talk about fiber broadband considerations, all of those kind of necessary infrastructure and planning concepts to get done too. And that leads into the broadband strategic planning. We talked about the need not only to have a plan locally, but in partnership with our communities neighboring us, such as the county and Atascadero. Of course, considerations when we talk about economic development is we've had great partnerships with the Chamber, Travel Paso, the Wine Alliance, Main Street, and the city's provided them funding over the years. Examining those and saying, is it time to modify the model, which we've been doing, maybe multiple year fundings when we talk about a 2-year budget cycle, or are the current levels sustainable? What are their needs, and how do we help support those critical groups to our ecosystem here in the city? And then, of course, there's the broader picture. There are proactive business development activities. So meaning that there may be yet to be identified businesses that might want to move here. When we talk about the next bullet point, which is cannabis, when you talk about some of these industries that come here, there's often feeder businesses that want to join, whether we're talking spaceport and engineering opportunities, or cannabis and laboratory testing, or other things. We have to keep our eyes and ears open and make sure that we have a good process for identifying those businesses and then drawing them here. Next slide. Infrastructure. We've talked about our major infrastructure needs just in this bonding conversations. Bridges, overpass. One of the things that is worth highlighting also is that our lease is almost up on our Corporation Yard, which is on Riverside. We're inside of 2 years on that, and we have to find a new location. One of the options is having to build a new Corporation Yard, which we've done some preliminary costing and planning. If we were to include it on the property out there with Fire Station number 3, current estimates, because of, as everybody knows, inflation is high and costs are high, almost $11 million if we were to construct a brand new Corporation Yard. We talk about existing roads, libraries, and City Hall. One of the estimates, we've done some preliminary examination on City Hall and library expansion to accommodate both of those needs. Current estimate is about $19 million to advance those two areas. And as we said, cost estimates continue to escalate. It seems like depending on every time we get a new estimate, they go up by a significant amount, and it makes planning extremely difficult. Of course, we have one-time funding options that we've used with council's permission. We brought forward that $5.5 million spending plan with regard to ARPA funds. About $4.7 million of that is set aside, as we discussed, for some of these major infrastructure needs, knowing that we're going to have to most likely use a combination of those funds and in conjunction with some of our savings to advance some of the projects. And then, of course, looking at some of our reserve policy levels, as Mr. Cornell pointed out, we could be close to 50% soon. And is that an appropriate level? Do we want to use that money on some of our other needs throughout the community? And then we extensively covered J20 and some of those one-time balances, which are pretty well planned, but nonetheless, we're going to have expansion opportunities in both police, fire, and streets to allocate those funds moving forward. One of the major themes you've heard us talk about over and over and over again today is shovel-ready plans. That's something that if we're going to take advantage of outside funding and either it's matching funds, leveraging federal or state dollars, we got to have plans ready to go. Once we get that funding, we can put a shovel in the ground and start building. And so that's, our approach on that section. So our priority projects right now, we've talked about all of these, I do believe. State Route 46 and Union Overpass is probably our number one focus here when we talk about infrastructure needs. It's critical. I heard comments from the community about street lights or other options on signal lights on Highway 46. Caltrans has made it abundantly clear that they will never approve one of those based upon the $1 billion worth of expressway funding that they've invested, and they've told us that the only thing that they're interested in seeing happen in Paso Robles is the 46 Union Overpass. And as I mentioned, that's to the tune of about $50 million. The sister project to that is the Wero Creek Bridge, where we, of course, need to purchase right-of-way for both of those projects, which means the land around there, so that way we can secure that. As Mr. Frace pointed out, there's a lot of interest in the community about resorts and hotels and the like, and we don't want that property to disappear and make our transportation infrastructure job even more difficult. South Vine realignment, we're going to need to construct that bridge within 7 years, which is about $10 to $12 million estimate on that. We're in progress on the police substation. We've got design going, but at some point we're going to need to fund the tenant improvements and the renovations for that building, which includes a expanded evidence and property area out near the airport on Second Wind Way. We talked about the Corporation Yard relocation, City Hall and Library. Local street maintenance, there's a lot of projects that we could accelerate or invest in. And one of the last ones that I wanted to talk about was signing and marking. We currently don't have a formalized process for identifying those and funding those, so staff has put that in there. But that's also an opportunity to maybe achieve some of the goals that you mentioned earlier in the presentation, whether it's lighting downtown or other things, I think could naturally fall within, that bin, so to speak. Next slide. Other infrastructure improvements. One of our focuses, we've heard the community, we've heard council, and one of the first steps, and I thank Deedis and her team over there for this is, and of course, Mr. Hewitt is advancing this Urban Green Grant opportunity to improve one of the gateways to the city. A lot of our tourists and visitors come in, they stop at McDonald's, they stop at AM, PM, they stop at Carl's Jr. along there. And of course, there's some quality of life challenges that we're finding when it comes to, some of the activities that are over there. So one of the things that is within the city's purview is being able to, identify ways through environmental design to improve that area. So that's one of the things that we're looking at there as well. And of course, through that process, there's some investment going on in that area, and bringing in our development partners out there to also help improve that area. Public safety, the recruitment goes on. We have to figure out a way to recruit and retain more of our police officers. One of our informal surveys that we did is there's 50 to 75 police officers that live in the city of Paso Robles that don't work for the city of Paso Robles. I view that as a great opportunity to help us maybe potentially solve. I think the last number I heard is we're about 9 vacancies down right now. None of those are being funded through J20 because we take 1 step forward, 2 steps back due to retirements, people moving out of the area, people going to new departments. And we know that one of the things that we learned is that all the other communities' version of J20, they invested significantly in pay increases for public safety folks. When we were pursuing the J20, and one of the things that we focused in on was getting more boots on the ground. So now we have to kind of look at that and figure out how do we balance the need for additional bodies with staying competitive, so we don't just turn into a training grounds within the city. And the competition is fierce right now throughout the community. Everybody is competing for the same pool of candidates, and everybody is hiring just about as quickly as they can. So on the fire side of things, I know Chief Stornetta has been ringing the alarm bell, no pun intended, when it comes to paramedics. Although they're doing a great job recruiting firefighters, paramedics seem to be at a premium right now, and trying to, figure a solution out to that. And last, of course, is the public safety facilities that we mentioned earlier, Fire Station number 3 and the new substation. Housing and homeless. One of the big discussion points in recent months has been advancing our discussions with ECHO and collaborating with other stakeholders. They've been a great partner in the community, providing the Project Home Key facility that has, in connection with HASLO, that is really, providing an opportunity to get people not only emergency shelter housing on a nightly basis, but that more sustained long-term approach with HASLO as well. I think that as we consider some of the opportunities with potentially funding ECHO or others, I think that refining our operational understandings with those groups to make sure that it's a win-win for the community as well as for those organizations that are in need. Of course, there's always opportunities there, and we're always evaluating those, doing a better job when it comes to our unhoused populations, expanding services, looking at the models that various folks use and how do we support those or alter them or support them. And that comes through outreach activities and, data. I can't underscore the need for data and to be able to, have those key performance indicators on how we're doing so we can really report back to council and the community that we're either achieving our goals or identifying where improvement is needed. So quality of life amenities, I think this is one of our strong suits. Our community services and our ComDev folks are really, they really key in on these, whether it's new developments that are coming in or looking for an eye to the future. And here's some of the things that we've identified there. Of course, when it comes to, we've talked about Barney Schwartz Park, as well as the other ball fields throughout town and our aging facilities, maintenance and upkeep and making sure that we're meeting community expectation with regard to the quality and the level of services. So proposing increased staffing in those areas is going to be something that you'll see. Sherwood Master Plan update and pickleball courts. We're still advancing those forward. We kind of hit a bump in the road when it came to some environmental concerns, but staff has done a great job quickly identifying alternatives to be able to solve that problem for us in short order, but it's going to take some investment there as well. And we continue to plan for bike and pedestrian plans, North River Corridor and the Niblick Corridor as well. And then, of course, activating those library and recreation plans, which I know the community and library supporters have been anxiously awaiting for years to see those finally executed. Governance and community partnerships. We talk about formalizing communication strategies. That's probably in my career in government over 26 years now is the one area that you always hear regularly is that you can do a better job communicating your plans, your strategies, your goals, your objectives, and especially your accomplishments. There's just such a thirst and an appetite for that. So finding those strategies that work and investing in them. We talk about process improvements and procedures. Since Chris and I have been working together, he and I have noticed some similarities. There's huge need to improve the way we manage our documents throughout the city. Modernization and records management is a key. Talking about doing things smarter through the use of technology is going to be something that you're going to see as a point of emphasis over the next couple of years, at least from our perspective, is educating the community and council on those needs. And then our agenda management and modernization as well. Right now, and I'm sure Melissa could speak to this a little bit, that there's probably at least 4, 5, 6 different disparate programs and software options, and of course hand and everything else just to get our agenda prepped and ready and distributed and published, which is for her, I'm surprised she doesn't have all of her hair pulled out because we test her every time we're putting together an agenda. Citywide overall, some of the things that you're going to see at the end of this year, all of our labor agreements expire. So, a soup to nuts evaluation of our philosophy when it comes to compensation, recruitment, and retention. And then one of the big things that we're looking at is ways to improve efficiencies, which includes the potential reorganization of our public works department. In recent months, council is well aware of our time investment in preserving our relationships with other communities through IWMA, SB 1383, and our water department. There's just so much in our utilities side of things. We have not only that, we have our landfill. All of those could be a standalone operation, and we're looking at ways to create efficiencies and synergies through reorganizing our public works department there. And last but not least on that list is, and it was mentioned, I think Mr. Hammond did earlier, is our policy and our plan regarding CalPERS and our 115 trust and how we want to move forward with that. I believe those are our final slides. And this is the time that if we want to bring it back to council for questions and to the community, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. So let's go through our question phase here. Any questions of clarification? We'll open it up to the public again. Time for council questions. Who's up? Mr. Strong?
Yes, real quick. On the infrastructure area, Commerce Way wasn't mentioned. I know it's already scheduled, but I'm not sure. I'm getting asked every single day because half of that road is nearly 100 years old and it is just falling apart. It's disintegrating. When are we going to finally do something with that? Yeah, I guess, Ditas, I think you're up. That one.
I believe it's in fiscal year 22-23.
Okay, so next year.
Yes.
Okay, or the end of this year into next year, whatever.
Right.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. I needed that answer just to tell some of these people it's going to happen. It's actually going to happen. All right. Other than that, all I had it's not a question, Mr. Mayor, but congratulations, because we're now using sophisticated big city planning tools for our small city use and significant competition with the big boys. And that's real progress. Thank you.
Questions? Mr. Gregory?
Infrastructure slide. So Ty, and the ARPA funding, what else is in that besides for the $5.5 million?
Yeah, so in that $5.5 million, and Mr. Cornell can augment this comment, but $4.7 million was set aside for infrastructure. We also appropriated funds for recreational pickleball, I believe came out of there, as well as we set some funds aside for homeless services that we dedicated to the police department to help with cleanup and riverbed as well as we had hopes at some point that we might be able to partner with the county to fund some sort of psych tech position to help out the CAT team. But as we found out through COVID, everybody's struggling right now to retain and recruit personnel.
And where we'll have to come before that. And so I don't want to interfere in the strategy here, but I want to discuss or have an eventual conversation about it, is that if we put that first and we don't get the funding for it, what do we do?
Sure. I think our focus right now is, as we said, is to, how do you eat an elephant in bites, right? So we're looking at all of these projects in a similar vein. One of the things that we know we need that we can probably control on our end is trying to figure out a way to fund the land acquisition so that we have that secured when the time comes, as well as getting those PS&E shovel-ready plans ready. And that's going to take a little bit of time to do, but once we have some sort of pathway forward on those, it should open up the door, at least that's what we're hoping, to achieve, either matching contributions or fundings from other sources, whether it's state, federal, or military.
So, and as I want to ask a question. So the way I understand it, where Warrow Creek Bridge and South Vine Street, we already own the property, or we already have a dedication from the owners.
So Warrow, and I think Mr. Frace can probably speak to this. Warrow, we still need land acquisition to be able to get across the Warrow. But Mr. Frace, do you want to speak to those?
Yeah, on Warrow, the majority of that right-of-way is subject to the final map. The final map still hasn't been recorded, so we don't actually own it, but once the map records, we should own it. Same thing with South Vine. We don't currently own that. The annexation sets all that in place, but we're spending this year, and that's really what this year is about, is getting this right-of-way. So we need to get both those maps recorded, get all that right-of-way transferred. That is a priority.
And as far as there's agreements in place with the property owners to have that happen without having to purchase.
Correct. Now, on Warrow, we still need some additional right-of-way. The project's kind of worked from when the map was approved, so there's still some right-of-way to negotiate there.
Okay, good. I just wanted to ask that question, see if there's any financial requirements for that. Okay, thank you, Warren. That's it. That's it for me. Yes.
With regard to the landing and development agreement that we're currently negotiating, how's that going? In other words, I think we're of the opinion that they're going to need to step up. Is that kind of what we're seeing from their side, that they kind of understand that, or what's going on directly?
No, I think they're well aware of our financial situation and our obligations. Warren, myself, and the rest of the city staff that are involved with this project have been meeting regularly, almost weekly, with the landing project. I indicated that one of the struggles that we have is trying to figure out the traffic circulation challenges that are around there, and talking with Caltrans. And so obviously a $25 million bridge we can't build within the time frame of this project opening up. So one of the things that we're focusing in on is a temporary or interim option to achieve success with that planning effort. And that's one of the things that is a major point of our discussion right now, is figuring out what kind of fees that we can apply towards that, what their fair share of that project is going to be. And it's not just the bridge, it's, the whole area over their roadways. There's a lot of infrastructure that's going to go into supporting that project. I got to say that Majestic has been a great partner so far. They've shown an extreme willingness to work with the city. And so I'm very confident that we'll come to a solution that will be a win-win for the community as well as for their development hopes.
Okay, thank you.
So, any other council questions? Anyone else? Okay, we're going to open it to the public. Anybody like to comment? This is your opportunity. And if you're in the room, please come to the podium, give us your name. And if you're listening in and like to call, now is your opportunity. So dial those numbers. Welcome.
Evening again, Dale Guston, 945 Spring Street. I came here in 79, and soon after then, we had a very smart treasurer financial advisor who said you need to build a reserve, and we did. And that carried us through the recession in the 90s. And I'm looking at what we're doing again. And we don't want to spend that reserve. We can spend it down a portion, because I know that some of that reserve we got now is pandemic money. That's one-time stuff, as you know. And so we want to stretch it out. We can do some of these projects that we couldn't afford before. And actually, the city of Paso Robles is much better off than, say, the city of Atascadero, because we have the largest per capita sales tax revenue of any city in this county. And we're very lucky that way because we've encouraged development here to where some other cities have not encouraged development. But so far, we've done a pretty good job of planning that development. Let's keep it up. And I like what I'm seeing on this. The City Hall was promised a long time ago, so I concur with Mr. Hammond and those that think that we need to think about that again. Let's get that City Hall built. This was meant to be a library and a conference room. Think about getting the City Hall built one way or another, please.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to speak? I see no one rising. Anyone online?
Dana Stroud.
Welcome, Dana.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you for the opportunity. I realize in the earlier session I may have shared a bit more than was needed during that goal setting, but I have a question and then a comment. And the question is first regarding the ARPA funds and to clarify the expenditure deadline date for when those funds need to be spent per the guidelines provided by the federal government. And then the comment, I didn't see this in the goal setting session, and perhaps I missed it in other documents or in other efforts that you have. But in looking at future opportunities to pursue, whether it's state or federal funding, I'm looking to see where the city is choosing to align with state goals, very specifically around climate resilience in the state of California. And there is significant funding that is being discussed and has been identified for the types of projects around the climate resilience, climate response. And I just didn't see it referenced in the goals. And I'm just proposing that as you move forward and you are considering where you're pursuing funding from the state and federal government, that you clearly identify and articulate where climate resilience fits into your overall city goals and the projects that you are pursuing for implementation. Thank you for your consideration.
Very good. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else online?
No, sir.
Thank you. We'll close public comment, bring it back to the council. What I have on my agenda is that we're going to discuss budget priorities, although I think we've overlapped into that already. So I would like to ask if we get some questions answered, just a couple of them. Deadlines for expending ARPA funds, Mr. Cornell?
Yes, the ARPA funds need to be expended by December 31st, 2024. So we have about 3 years a little less than 3 years to go. There is an exception where if we're in contract with a contractor by that time, we could actually expend the money by December 31st, 2026, but we have to be in contract by the end of 2024.
And it's a fairly broad way we can spend the money.
Correct. And yeah, I think the buckets that we kind of have already identified with infrastructure and homelessness then definitely meet that. And then one other emphasis of clarification to the ARPA money is in a standalone fund too. It's not combined with the general fund. And so all the general fund statistics of it being 50% does not include ARPA. ARPA is a whole additional
So those temporary funds are not reflected in our general fund reserve balance, right?
Correct.
Thank you. And then there was a question or at least a comment about how we relate to the state's climate policies with regard to funding opportunities. Have we taken that into consideration?
You bet. We're acutely aware of those. The governor's tied climate resilience to most of the funding for almost all of our infrastructure needs and projects. One of the first things that I learned, working with Warren and his team was what a great job they've done to address those. We're at a disadvantage living in a rural community because most of these climate resilience requirements are really focused on the large metropolitan areas. We have a large commuting workforce that comes and goes from the city, which is a strike against us. But Warren and his team and the city staff in general have looked at alternate modes of transportation, different routes to get people off of major highways. All of those things are implied and required for us, and they're a real challenge. I won't downplay that. For a rural community, for us to comply with vehicle miles traveled, all of those things are a challenge, but we're very much aware of them. I can tell you that Christopher Aleckl and his team have done a good job when it comes to our solar farm, which is getting ready to break ground coming up this spring. Couple few hurdles to get by, and you'll probably see a shovel in the ground on that, which will really reduce the city's reliance on outside power sources, help us with cost savings, won't generate any income per se, but will save us costs when it comes to our energy consumption here within the city. So I say that's a long-winded response to say we're very aware of it. We work that into all of our grant applications and are making plans accordingly to comply to the best of our ability with all of those requirements.
Very good. Thank you. We have no official action scheduled in this portion of the meeting for the council. We're here to right now give any further comments on our feelings about budget priorities. We've kind of expressed those on and off throughout the discussion. I ask now if there are any other pointed items you'd like to bring up. Mr. Hammond?
I was going to ask maybe Chief Nord to talk a little bit about the staffing, that he's inherited there at the police department, and maybe what his thoughts are in the future, and kind of reinforce what we heard a little bit today with regard to retainage. What do you see that is working, Damien? I mean, is there any flags coming ahead for us, or might expand a little bit?
Like I think has been mentioned, we have 9 vacancies. Obviously, we'll have more coming in July. We have 3 in the academy currently. We have 2 laterals and backgrounds. There obviously is a concern that we may have a couple people leave over the next, anywhere from 3 to 4 months, if not sooner, just for different reasons. Some people, we had some people move out of state, which that's nothing necessarily we can do about that, but we have had people leave for higher pay and for some other reasons. If we could, speaking to Mr. Lewis's point, if we could get some incentives to try to get some of the people locally to come here, it would be phenomenal. We are starting and kind of an outreach, reaching out to some of the neighboring counties, going to the academies, going to the colleges, trying to get whatever we can. But I think everyone here understands if you get someone from, let's just say, Kern County, Fresno County, trying to afford to come and live here, it's just hard. We currently still have people commuting 90, 120 miles to come to work here. So those are just some of the struggles we face. Obviously they're real struggles. We're trying to think outside the box and do anything we can to try to recruit.
I'm thinking too, the poaching opportunities, so to speak, with people who actually live here and don't work for us, seems like that is a great advantage where we might be able to talk with those folks and see what it would take to get them to reconsider, moving or staying, with the more local. It seems like I didn't realize there was that many. Truly, I didn't think that was the case at all, but interesting concept. So thank you, Damon.
Thank you, sir.
The other thing I was going to mention too is maybe have Jonathan speak to the fire station staffing.
Sure.
The staff at the fire department, again, is, I think, pretty well loaded, but can we get an update on that?
And if I could, I was just going to tag on the Chief Nord there. So Mr. Lewis brought up, 50 to 75 police officers here in the North County, or in Paso. I would say in the North County, firefighters are triple that don't work for us because of the work schedule. So we have people that live here that work for LA City, Orange County, Santa Barbara County, and all the Bay Area departments. So it's just the wage. We made a couple of offers to 2 paramedics that worked at Templeton, and they turned it down. So in regards to Station 3, we already have the staffing because you already allocated that last year. We got the SAFER grant, so we had 9 people total on the SAFER grant, which saved the city almost $4 million. And those grants, one's coming up, I think, next year now. And then we have the other 3 still on the grant. So that provided us all the staffing we needed for Station 3. So we have 2 engines running out of Station 1 right now, and once Station 3 is open, we'll just move that engine company out there.
Got it. So the next group might put the squad back in motion too, maybe?
It is in the plan for J20. I believe it's 2024, 2025, somewhere right in there. And the reason is, and I'll show you when I provide you a more in-depth report when I present our standards of coverage strategic plan on April 4th. And then there you'll see, how our emergency service demand's increasing, but yet we're still not able to make the city council goals. It actually decreased this year, our response times. I should say they increased overall.
For time.
And so, but I'll explain all that to you in depth with data to go along with it.
Very good. Thank you, John.
And Jonathan?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. I wanted to ask you a quick question about the paramedic situation. So what's your strategy and thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's difficult. There's a couple of things. One is the work schedule. We're never going to compete with the Bay Area. We're not going to compete with Southern California or Santa Barbara County as well. But there's a shortage of paramedics throughout the U.S. right now. And what we're finding is one more year of school, you can become a PA or a nurse and get paid twice of what our paramedics are getting paid. So all the departments in the county are struggling with it, and we can't make the offers to keep up with the other departments.
How many paramedics do we have on staff?
We have, offhand, I don't know the exact, but we try keeping it at least 50% of our staff.
50?
At least, yes.
Wow.
And that's what I was going to ask further, Jonathan. How many of our calls are ALS versus BLS? In other words, do you really need to have a paramedic there on that call?
Yes, so there's a couple, there's twofold to answer that. One is, yes, I'll pull the stats for you, but a high percentage of them are ALS. And the reason for that, and if you read my annual report, is really the primary care physicians. We don't have any left in this community. All the physicians I know, they're not taking any new clients. So their answer to that is they call us for all their medical emergencies. And so they have no preventative care leading up to it. So their problems become even worse when we show up. The second part to that was, as far as the paramedics, is the ambulance. So the community has increased their service utilization rates to utilizing that ambulance. And it's because they don't have the primary care, prior primary care physicians to take care of their medical problems. So we're running out of ambulances. It's not uncommon for us to wait for an ambulance from San Luis Obispo or Cambria.
So we talked about possibility of the state and county being able to allow cities to have their own ambulance service. Is that still working through?
Yes.
Okay. That's, I think, kind of important. I think to back up, San Luis Ambulance when those occasions happen, but also it could be a revenue generating, maybe for the city to be able to transport.
So we're working with the city managers right now, and I hopefully can introduce our options to the city council probably within the next 2 months.
Hang on, Steve. Steve.
Yes, sir.
Backup question, quick.
Yes, sir.
That in order to get that ambulance as a city ambulance, don't we need legislative action?
It would not be a city ambulance. It would be more of a regionalization type service.
Okay, but it's still going to take some legislation to do it aside from what we've got currently.
Legislation is already out there that's available for us to utilize in these options.
Good. Has that passed? Or is it just in process?
It's passed.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So, Jonathan, right now, currently we have one ambulance, right?
We have one ambulance, one 24-hour ambulance and one 12-hour ambulance, but the 12-hour ambulance is often doing transfers. So either transferring patients from Twin Cities to San Luis or higher levels of care, which would be to the Valley, Stanford, UCLA, things like that.
So you're going to come back with an idea, huh?
Yes.
Good.
Is San Luis Ambulance thinking of expanding, though? It seems like there's an opportunity here that they should be able to step up, but no?
It's difficult when you're a for-profit company.
Yeah.
But yes, hopefully, actually in the next 90 days, I'm going to hopefully have 221s with all of you.
I'll put it on the calendar.
What's that?
I'll put it on the calendar.
We're working on it. It is a top priority.
Good.
Any other council comments, budget priorities? Councilman Garcia? No? So I just want to say that when you started with the second set of slides, I was pretty happy. The first two looked like my list of things, and then we didn't rehearse that, folks. So there are a couple other things that I could quibble about, but overall, I think that the presentation by staff pretty much mirrors my ideas for prioritization for city resources for the next 2 years. So unless there are any further comments, I think we're done. Is there anything else? Steve, Jeff, something else?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
So, and this is more of a comment than anything else. So, Ty, if we have the ARPA funds, and we did have surplus also, correct, for the last year. So, when we get into the budget discussions, we will consider those items at the same time. So the ARPA funds and the surplus for funding things.
Well, the ARPA funds you've already made an allocation for. So you, in a separate council action, you prioritized those funds. It doesn't mean the council can't reconsider those or use reserves if if they have a higher priority initiative identified. However, you did make an allocation at this point. Mr. Cornell might have some comments.
Yeah, I think, yeah, when we come, after this discussion, we sharpen our pencils and kind of put the numbers and the priorities in order. And then we kind of come up with different funding strategies. Obviously, yeah, fund reserves and ARPA will definitely be in the mix on how we fund some of these initiatives.
Right. So one of the items specifically I was thinking about is the land acquisition for the overpass. So, that's certainly in the amount of surplus that we had. So it might be a really good use for that. So just want to make sure that's happening. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no further comments, upcoming events, Development Review Committee meeting, Monday, February 28th, 3:30 p.m. Our next City Council meeting will be Tuesday, March the 1st, 6:30 p.m. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Councilman Hammond, second by Councilman Strong. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all for your hard work on a Saturday.